Congratulations. I want to say that word to you before I say anything else in this conversation, because it is the truest and most important thing I could open with, and because what it points to is something you have not yet seen but that I have already seen, and what I have seen is the reason I am here speaking to you today with this specific message in this specific moment in your story. Congratulations is not a word I use lightly. It is not a word I place at the beginning of a message, the way someone places a casual greeting at the start of a letter without intending its full meaning. When I say congratulations to you right now, I mean it with the full weight of what the word is supposed to carry and what it has always carried in the conversations I have had with my people when something significant has been settled in their favor. Something has happened, something has been decided, something has been moved in the unseen dimension that governs everything that becomes visible in the dimension you are currently living in. Something has been arranged, put into motion, given a direction, and set moving toward you with a specificity and intentionality that the word miracle is the right word for. And that is why I opened this conversation with congratulations. Because when I look at what has been arranged for you, the appropriate response is not concern, not caution, not wait and see. The appropriate response is the word that has been used throughout history when I have moved on behalf of someone who has been faithful in a long and difficult season. Congratulations. But I need to add something to that word immediately. I need to add an instruction that I am asking you to hold carefully for the full length of what I am about to say to you. Do not tell anyone, not yet, not before this conversation is finished, not before you have received the full context of what I am naming as the miracle, not before you have taken the specific step that I am going to describe before this conversation ends. The reason is not secrecy for its own sake. The reason is that the miracle I am calling you to witness today is not the kind of thing that can be received through a summary. It cannot be fully understood through a description someone else gives you after they have partially processed it. It can only be fully received through the specific experience of this conversation in its entirety, from the beginning to the end, with the complete weight of your attention engaged in every word I am about to say. There will be time to share it, after you have received it in full and after you have taken the step, and after the first evidence of what I am describing has begun showing up in the specific areas of your life where the miracle is designed to express itself. Then share it. Then tell the people who are ready to hear it what you received on this specific day. But right now, this conversation is between you and me, and I need all of you present in it. I want to tell you why I said especially today. I want to spend a moment on that phrase because it was placed in this message with a precision that I do not want you to miss. Every day is a day in which something is available. Every day carries its own provision and its own invitation and its own version of what I have arranged for the people who are walking with me. But there are specific days that are different from the ordinary provision of ordinary days. There are days that function as hinges, as turning points, as the specific coordinates in a story where the trajectory changes. And the phrase especially today was placed in this message because this is one of those days, not for everyone reading these words. For you specifically. The you who arrived at this conversation with the specific history and the specific hunger and the specific combination of faith and weariness that you are carrying right now. I want to be direct with you about something. I see what you are carrying, not in general terms. I see the weight of the specific season you have been in. I see the length of the season. I see the way the sincerity of your effort has been real, and the consistency of your faith has been remarkable, and the quietness of the endurance you have been exercising has been something I have been watching with both grief, grief because the carrying has been heavy, pride because of the character that has been built in the carrying. And I want you to know that both of those things, the grief and the pride, are part of why I am here today with the word I opened with. Congratulations. The carrying produced something, and the something it produced has been placed in front of you on this specific day. I need to open a question right now that I am going to answer before this conversation is over. I want you to hold this question consciously in your mind as I speak, because the answer to it is one of the most important things I will say today, and because the building toward the answer is part of what makes the answer as significant as it is designed to be. Here is the question. What is the miracle? I told you congratulations. I told you something has been decided. I told you there is a miracle I am calling you to witness, and a specific step required to receive it. What I have not yet told you is what the miracle is, what was decided, what the congratulations specifically points to. That is the question I am asking you to hold open right now, and it is the question that the rest of this conversation is building toward answering with the full precision and specificity it deserves. Because I want to say something about why I am not answering it immediately, not to withhold, not to create suspense for its own sake, but because the answer to what the miracle is requires a foundation. It requires that you understand the problem the miracle addresses. It requires that you understand the mechanism through which the miracle operates. It requires that you understand the science and the evidence and the specificity of what has been arranged, not because I need you to verify my word scientifically before you trust it, but because when a miracle lands in a person who fully understands what it is restoring, the miracle is received at a depth that produces lasting change rather than temporary relief. I want this to produce lasting change, so I am building the foundation first. Let me tell you what you have been living with, not the version you present when someone asks how things are going, not the summary that is true but incomplete, the full version, the one that lives in the quiet moments, the one that appears in the space before sleep and in the pause between activities and in the specific ache that rises when you encounter someone who seems to be operating from the fullness of what you know you were supposed to be, operating from and are not yet. That ache is not envy. That ache is the recognition of your own design. It is the soul recognizing what it was made for and registering the distance between the design and the current experience. I want to speak to that distance right now. I want to name it for what it is and tell you what it means that I am here today with the specific word I came to deliver. The distance between your design and your current experience is not the result of insufficient faith. It is not the result of inadequate effort. It is not the punishment for past mistakes or the withholding of what you were promised. It is the result of a specific condition, a specific mechanism that I am going to name in this conversation that has been reducing your access to the full capacity I placed in you from the beginning. And the miracle I am calling you to witness is the specific restoration of that access. Not a partial restoration, not a gradual and uncertain improvement. The restoration of the full architecture of the mind I gave you, returning to the level of operation it was at in the beginning before the conditions of the world began reducing it. That is what the congratulations is for, because the provision for that restoration is now available to you today. I want to go back to the beginning, not the beginning of your struggle, the beginning of you, because the miracle I am describing, the one I want you to witness today, makes the most sense when it is held against the backdrop of who you were before the world began to shape you into something smaller than what I designed. There was a version of you, not a hypothetical version, but a real one that actually existed and that you actually lived as, that was operating at a level of capacity that most adults only encounter in their best moments and that children live in as their ordinary daily experience. You were curious about everything, not because you were performing curiosity or because you were being deliberately attentive, because your mind was genuinely and effortlessly engaged with everything it encountered. Learning was not labor. It was what your mind did naturally when it was exposed to something new, because the architecture that receives and processes and integrates new information was fully operational and fully hungry. You saw connections between things that others around you did not immediately see. You solved problems, not by laboring through them, but by arriving at solutions through a process that felt more like recognition than construction. You created things, whether those creations were elaborate, imaginary worlds or practical inventions or new ways of approaching the ordinary challenges of a young life, with a fluency and a naturalness that did not require motivation or discipline because the creative faculty was not something you had to access. It was simply running. It was simply what your mind did when it was allowed to engage with the things in front of it without the constraints that would come later. That was not exceptional. That was not the experience of an unusually gifted child. That was the normal operating experience of a human mind functioning at the level it was designed to function at. That was the experience of whole brain function. Both hemispheres of your brain, the left hemisphere with its analytical and sequential and linguistic intelligence, and the right hemisphere with its pattern recognition and intuitive and creative intelligence, were operating simultaneously. They were in active communication with each other. They were each contributing what they were designed to contribute to the processing of every experience, every problem, every encounter you had with the world. The technical term for what that coordination produces is cross-hemisphere coherence, and what it produces in a person who is experiencing it is not just better thinking, it is better being. The person who is operating from full cross-hemisphere coherence does not just solve problems more efficiently. They experience reality differently. They experience themselves differently. There is a quality of aliveness, of presence, of connection to what is happening inside them and around them. That is the experiential correlate of the neural coordination I am describing. And that quality of experience, that aliveness, is what you were living in the early years before the narrowing began. I want to be specific about the narrowing, about what began to happen to the whole brain function that was your original operating state as the years of ordinary life in the ordinary world accumulated. It was not a single event. It was not a specific trauma, though trauma can accelerate it. It was the accumulated effect of a specific kind of demand that the environment of modern education and then professional life places on the human mind. That demand is for a specific and narrow kind of processing. Sequential, analytical, linguistic. The demand of the classroom that rewards the left hemisphere and progressively reduces the engagement of the right. The demand of the standardized test that values what can be measured and eliminates what cannot. The demand of the workplace that rewards consistency and compliance and discourages the kind of lateral thinking and intuitive leap that the right hemisphere is specifically designed to produce. Over years of meeting that demand, the brain responds the way any system responds to sustained one-sided use. It optimizes for what is most frequently required. The left hemisphere, the one that serves the demands of most of what the modern world asks of a person, becomes more dominant. The right hemisphere, the one that produces the creative and intuitive and pattern-recognizing intelligence that was so effortlessly available in childhood, becomes progressively less engaged. Not damaged, not lost, less engaged. The communication between the two hemispheres, the cross-hemisphere coordination that was the original design, decreases. The person who was once operating from the full architecture of the mind I gave them begins operating from something closer to half of that architecture. And what that person experiences as the natural consequence of that narrowing is exactly what I described at the beginning of this conversation. The gap, the effort that exceeds the outcome, the sincerity that is not matched by the arrival, the prayers that feel answered at half the depth they seem to be moving toward, the creativity that shows up as flashes rather than as the sustained available flow it used to be, the sense that more is inside than is coming out. All of that is the description of a person who was designed for whole brain operation and who has been progressively operating from something less, not by choice, not by failure, by the accumulated effect of a world that demanded the narrowing. I want to dwell for a moment on the experience of the person who has been living with the narrowing for long enough that it has begun to feel like their identity rather than their condition. This is one of the most important distinctions in this conversation. The gap I have been describing, the distance between the capacity you were designed to operate from and the capacity that has been available to you in the years since the narrowing began, is a condition. It is not who you are. It is not the permanent and defining truth of what you are capable of. It is what has been produced by a specific, measurable, reversible change in how your brain has been operating. And the reversibility of it is the part I most want you to hear right now, because the miracle I am describing is not a miracle that changes who you are. It is a miracle that removes the condition that has been obscuring who you already are. I also want to speak to what it feels like from the inside to carry the narrowing without knowing that what you are carrying has a name and a cause and a specific solution. It feels like limitation that belongs to you, like a ceiling that is a part of your structure rather than something that has been placed on your structure by external conditions. It feels like this is just how I am, rather than this is what has happened to me over time in conditions that any human mind would respond to in the same way. The people who have experienced the restoration almost universally describe a specific moment of recognition when they understood that what they had been experiencing as personal limitation was a neural condition, not a character verdict, a physical situation with a physical resolution. I want you to hold what I just described against the word I opened this conversation with. Congratulations. Hold those two things together, the gap that has been the experience, and the congratulations that names what has now been made available. Because the reason for the congratulations is specifically and precisely the provision for the gap. The miracle I am calling you to witness is not a miracle of comfort. It is a miracle of restoration. The restoration of what was operating at full capacity in the beginning and that was gradually narrowed by the conditions of the life you have been living since. And the provision for that restoration has been placed in your path today, on this specific day. which is why I said especially today. You were designed for more than what the narrowing has been producing, not as an aspiration, as your original factory setting, as the actual baseline of what was intended for you before the world began optimizing your brain for the demands of the world rather than for the demands of what I made you to do. The version of you that was operating from that baseline was real. It was you. It still is you, at the level of what your neural architecture is capable of, and the miracle I am calling you to witness is the specific provision for the return of that baseline. The return to the operating level that was present in the beginning. That is what is available today, and I want to make sure you do not miss it. I said the condition has a name and a cause and a specific solution. Let me give you the name first. The condition is called whole brain deficit. It is the measurable reduction in cross-hemisphere coordination, the active collaboration between the left and right hemispheres of the brain, from the level that was present in the early years to the significantly reduced level that characterizes most adults who have spent decades in the conditions of modern life. This is not a term that belongs to self-help vocabulary. It is a term that belongs to neuroscience, to the decades of research that began when Roger Sperry, whose work on how the two hemispheres of the brain function separately and together earned him the Nobel Prize in Physiology and Medicine in 1981, opened the scientific investigation into what happens in a person when the two hemispheres are not working at the level of active coordination they were designed to work at. What Sperry and the researchers who extended his work found is both simple and profound. When the two hemispheres of the brain are in active, coordinated communication, the person thinks differently, not just more efficiently, differently in kind. The left hemisphere, operating alone or as the dominant partner with minimal contribution from the right, produces a specific kind of thinking. Analytical, sequential, careful, thorough, but limited. Limited to what can be constructed from known information through deliberate procedure. The right hemisphere, when it is actively engaged in the conversation, contributes something that the left hemisphere cannot contribute alone: pattern recognition, intuitive synthesis, creative leap, the ability to sense connections between things that deliberate analysis would take much longer to construct, if it could construct them at all. When both hemispheres are active and coordinated, the quality of thinking that emerges is not just the sum of the two contributions. It is a qualitatively different kind of intelligence, the kind that produces what we call genius, not the genius of exceptional genetics or rare biological endowment, the genius of the fully operational human mind that was designed to operate with both hemispheres engaged simultaneously and that produces its maximum output when they are. This is not the intelligence of the few. This is the intelligence that was available to you as a child and that the research shows can be restored to any adult whose cross-hemisphere coordination has been reduced by the conditions I described. The person who has been on the receiving end of that research most consequentially is a neurologist named Dr. Daniel Barone. He has spent his career in New York working at the intersection of neuroscience and the practical application of what the science shows about human potential. And what he found in the research, after years of studying it from the inside as a practicing physician, is the answer to the question that most self-improvement methodologies, most spiritual growth frameworks, and most performance optimization approaches have been unable to answer. The question of why sincere effort, sustained over years, consistently produces less than what the effort was designed to produce. The answer, which the research points to with a consistency that spans multiple decades and multiple independent research groups, is the whole brain deficit, the gap between the cross-hemisphere coordination that was present in the beginning and the cross-hemisphere coordination that remains available after years of the narrowing I described in my last part. The effort has been sincere, the strategies have often been sound, the faith has been genuine, but the neural architecture through which the effort, the strategy, and the faith were expressed was operating at reduced capacity. And reduced capacity, even in the presence of maximum effort, produces reduced output, not because the person is insufficient, because the tool through which the person operates has been operating below its design specification. This is the diagnosis I need you to receive before I name the solution, not to produce despair, to produce the specific kind of relief that comes when a problem that has been mysterious finally reveals its mechanism. Because when the mechanism is visible, the solution becomes visible, and when the solution becomes visible and is placed within reach, the appropriate response is the word I opened this conversation with. Congratulations. not because the problem was not real, because the solution is real, available, and in your hands before this day ends. I want to tell you something about what it means that this understanding, the understanding of the whole brain deficit and its role in the gap between potential and expression, has not been available to most people in the popular conversation about why some people consistently reach what they are capable of and others do not. It has not been absent from the scientific literature. It has been present there for decades. The research is extensive, the findings are consistent, the reproducibility of the results across different laboratories and different subject populations is strong, but the findings have not traveled from the laboratory to the living room. They have not become the common framework through which people understand the experience of carrying more capacity than is currently available to express. I want you to understand what it means that you are receiving this understanding today. It means that you are, right now, among a relatively small group of people outside the scientific community who have access to the explanation that the research offers for the specific experience you have been carrying. Most people who have been carrying what you have been carrying will continue to interpret it through frameworks that address the expressions of the problem without addressing the root. They will continue to work on their habits, their mindset, their discipline, their spiritual practices, without ever reaching the level where the root condition is directly addressed. You now know what the root condition is, and in knowing it, you are positioned to address it in a way that most people around you will not address it for years, if ever. That positioning is not accidental. It is the miracle I have been building toward naming, not the existence of the research, not the availability of the tool Dr. Barone built. The fact that both of those things are in your path today. The fact that this specific conversation has been arranged so that the understanding and the solution arrive together at the specific moment in your specific story, when you were most prepared to receive them and most positioned to act on them. That is the arrangement I am asking you to recognize as the miracle. That is what the congratulations is for, not for something you did, for something I arranged, for you, on this day. I am not finished with the description of what the miracle makes available. I have named the condition, I need to name the solution, and I need to name it with the full specificity it deserves, giving you the complete picture of what it is, what it does, what the evidence shows about what it produces, and why the step of accessing it is the most important thing I am asking you to do before this day ends. That comes next, and I want you to stay for every word of it. The solution has a name, and the name matters, because the name describes exactly what the solution does and how it does it, and why the word miracle is not an overstatement when applied to what it produces in the life of a person who has been carrying the whole brain deficit for the years that most adults have been carrying it. The solution is called the Genius Switch. It is an 8-minute auditory sequence delivered through headphones that uses a technology called neural sync to deliver specific auditory signals to both hemispheres of the brain simultaneously. The specific design of the sequence, developed by Dr. Barone from the research literature on what auditory input the neural system responds to with increased cross-hemisphere activation, is calibrated to do one thing: to restore, progressively and cumulatively, the level of active collaboration between the left and right hemispheres that was present in the early years of your life and that has been reduced by the conditions of the decades since. I want to be specific about how it works, because specificity is what separates what I am describing from the category of vague promise that most people have encountered in the landscape of personal transformation. Neural sync is not a general term for relaxing audio. It is not binaural beats in the casual commercial sense, which is a category of audio that has been widely distributed with very inconsistent and often absent scientific backing. Neural sync refers to a specific design methodology developed and validated in clinical neuroscience research that uses the relationship between specific auditory frequencies and the brain oscillation patterns, those frequencies entrain, to produce measurable changes in how the two hemispheres are communicating with each other. The entrained oscillations that the sequence produces are the ones that research consistently associates with the coherent whole brain state that was present in childhood and that distinguishes the neural signature of what we call genius-level thinking from the more fragmented, left-dominant neural pattern of ordinary adult cognition. What that means in practical terms is this: 8 minutes of listening with headphones in a quiet space with eyes closed is the input the sequence requires from you. What the sequence delivers during those 8 minutes without any additional effort or practice or technique on your part, is the auditory signal that the neural system responds to with the activation of the cross-hemisphere communication pathways that the whole brain deficit has reduced. The brain does not need to be trained to respond to the signal. The response is built in. The response is what the architecture was designed to produce when it receives the signal. The signal has simply not been reliably present in the ordinary acoustic environment of a modern life. I want to tell you something about why this has not been available before now, or at least why it has not been available in a form that most people would have had access to. The research that identified the specific auditory signals that produce cross-hemisphere activation has been in the scientific literature for decades. But the application of that research to a practical tool that a person could use at home, without clinical equipment and without a clinical appointment, required a specific kind of bridge between the research laboratory and the real world. Dr. Barone built that bridge. He spent years studying the research literature in the depth that his clinical background made possible, and that most people approaching the topic from outside medicine would not have the training to navigate. He identified the specific frequencies, the specific timing, and the specific architectural design that the research showed was required to reliably produce the neural activation the science described. And then he built it. The 8-minute sequence that exists today, and that is what I am calling the miracle I am inviting you to witness, is the product of that work. It is not a version of something freely available on streaming platforms that someone has labeled with the language of genius activation. Dr. Barone and his team specifically studied what was available on those platforms and found that most of it contained none of the neural sync technology the research describes. The sequence he built was built to the specification that the science requires, and it produces what the specification predicts. The research supports it. The 18,456 people who have used it confirm it. And the guarantee that accompanies it is the provision that makes finding out whether it confirms what I am saying about it completely without financial risk. I want to tell you something about the miracle in the frame of the congratulations I opened this conversation with. The miracle is not just that this tool exists. Tools exist. Research exists. Solutions to real problems exist in the world without ever finding the people who most need them. The miracle is the arrangement. The fact that what Dr. Barone built and what you need in this specific day and this specific conversation have all been coordinated so that the solution and the person who needs the solution are in the same place at the same time. That is not algorithm, that is not coincidence, that is me, arranging the specific provision for the specific gap at the specific moment in the specific story of a specific person I have been watching carry that gap through a season that was longer than it needed to be. You are that person. This is that moment, and I am not asking you to take this step on faith alone, though faith is entirely appropriate. I am also providing you with the science and the testimonies and the guarantee and the price that make the faith redundant as the primary basis for the decision. Because the decision, when all of those things are in place, does not require faith to make it rational. It requires only the willingness to allow what I have arranged to do what I arranged it to do, which is what I am asking of you right now. The willingness to stay in this conversation long enough to receive the full picture, and then the willingness to take the step the full picture points toward. I'm going to tell you about the people who have already taken the step before you, not as statistics, as specific people with specific stories that are specific enough to be recognizable as the story of someone who was in conditions similar to yours and who took the step I am describing and who can report, from the other side of the experience, what it produced. The stories matter because they are the evidence that completes the picture the science begins. The science tells you what should happen. The stories tell you what actually happens, and what actually happens is the part that is most useful to a person who is deciding whether what I am describing is worth the specific step I am asking them to take. What those people consistently describe is not a dramatic single moment of transformation. They describe a shift in baseline, a change in what is available as the starting point rather than the ceiling, a change in what ideas arrive without effort, what decisions resolve without extended deliberation, what creative work flows without the friction they were used to bringing to it, a change that begins subtly and becomes unmistakable, a change that starts in the mind and shows up in everything the mind governs, which is everything. Let me tell you about Lisa. She lives in San Diego. When she came to the sequence, she was a professional who had been pressing hard at her career for years and arriving at outcomes that were real, but consistently below what the effort seemed like it should have been producing. She was not someone who had not tried. She had tried with sincerity and consistency across multiple approaches to the gap she was living with. She had read the books, she had engaged the coaching, she had maintained the spiritual disciplines, she had been to the places where people say the breakthrough happens, and she had experienced partial movement and then the re-establishment of a new version of the old ceiling. She found the sequence through a conversation similar to this one. She was skeptical, but not so skeptical that the guarantee did not overcome the skepticism. She accessed it. She began the 8 minutes. Within the first 2 weeks, she noticed what she describes as a change in the texture of her thinking. Not a dramatic before and after, a change in what was available without effort. The ideas she needed for her work began arriving before she was consciously reaching for them. She noticed this as different from what she had been used to. She continued the practice. By the end of the first month, she was noticing what she describes as a change in the speed of her decision-making, a reduction in the amount of deliberation that specific decisions required, a clarity that arrived more readily and with more confidence than she had been used to experiencing. By 3 months, she was producing creative work that she described as different in kind from what she had been producing before. Let me tell you about Matthew. He lives in Houston. When he came to the sequence, he was a father and a husband and a business owner who had been carrying the gap I described across all 3 of those roles simultaneously, not failing in any of them, but aware, in each of them, of a ceiling, a point beyond which the investment of effort and sincerity did not produce proportional return. He noticed it most acutely in his business, where his decisions had a quality of resolution that he was not satisfied with, not wrong decisions. Slow, deliberate decisions that required more of him than he felt they should require, and that still did not arrive at the level of clarity he was reaching for. He accessed the sequence through a moment of decision that he describes as making out of willingness rather than belief. He was willing to find out. The guarantee made willing sufficient. He began the 8 minutes. His first report, at 2 weeks, was that he was noticing something in his relationships before he was noticing it in his business, specifically in his relationship with his children. He was showing up to those relationships with a presence that he describes as different from what he had been bringing to them, a quality of attention that felt, to him, like the difference between being in a conversation and being in a conversation fully. By 6 months, his business had made a decision that he traces back to a clarity that arrived in month 3 and that he had not been able to reach before the practice began. Let me tell you about Ellie. She lives in Manhattan. When she came to the sequence, she was someone who was aware of a specific pattern that had traveled through her family for at least 2 generations. Not a pattern of catastrophic failure, a pattern of reaching a specific level of success and then stopping at the same wall her mother had stopped at and that her grandmother had stopped at before her mother. She did not have a name for the pattern. She had a very clear sense of its reality, of the way it expressed itself in her own life at roughly the same point in her career where it had expressed itself in theirs. She accessed the sequence not as a product but as a question. Is this the thing that breaks the pattern? She began the 8 minutes. Her experience was less about a specific domain of life and more about what she describes as the experience of being herself. She describes the shift as the difference between living at partial power and living at full power. The house did not change, she says. The furniture did not change. The floor plan of her life was the same. But the quality of inhabiting the space changed entirely. Within 6 months, she had made 3 decisions in areas of her life where the pattern had previously held, where the wall had previously re-established itself, and all 3 decisions moved through the wall rather than stopping at it. She describes this as the miracle, not the specific outcomes, though they were significant, the experience of being the person who made the decisions, the experience of operating from a fullness that the pattern had never previously allowed. These are not unusual people. They are not people with exceptional advantages or exceptional starting conditions. They are ordinary people in ordinary circumstances who experience the specific restoration that the research describes when the whole brain deficit is directly addressed. And the reason I'm telling you their stories right now is not to impress you with the outcomes. The outcomes are impressive, and they belong to the specific people I named. What I want you to receive from their stories is something different. I want you to receive the recognition of the specific thing in each of their stories that is also in your story, the gap. The effort that exceeded the outcome, the ceiling that re-established itself at a new level, the pattern that persisted despite the sincerity of the attempt to change it. That recognition, if you are feeling it right now as I speak, is not accidental. It is the confirmation that what I am describing is the right description of what you have been experiencing, and the confirmation that what worked for Lisa and Matthew and Ellie is the right provision for what you have been experiencing. The miracle I called you here to witness today is not abstract. It has already happened in the lives of 18,456 specific people who were in conditions similar to yours and who took the specific step that is in the description of this video right now. I want to say something about the word miracle in the context of what I have just described. I know that the word miracle can carry an expectation of the extraordinary, the impossible made possible, the sudden and dramatic reversal of conditions that had no natural path of resolution. And I want to tell you that what I am calling a miracle in this conversation is precisely that. The restoration of the full operation of the mind I gave you from the beginning is not the natural outcome of the conditions of modern life. It does not happen on its own. It does not happen through more effort applied to the same conditions. It does not happen through the tools and strategies and frameworks that address the expressions of the whole brain deficit without addressing the deficit itself. What produces it is specific and targeted and scientifically grounded and available to you today. That combination of factors, the specificity and the grounding and the availability, arriving at the specific moment in your story when they can be received and acted on, is the miracle. And the miracle has a step attached to it, not many steps, one step. And I am going to tell you about that step in the clearest and most specific way I am able to before this conversation ends. I want to speak to you now not as someone receiving information, but as the specific person I know you to be from the inside. I want to use a name for you that I have been holding for this moment in the conversation. You are the silent one, the one who has been carrying things that most people around you have not fully seen, the one who has maintained a public steadiness that did not always reflect the private weight, the one who has not made a production of the difficulty of the season, who has not turned the carrying into a performance of suffering, who has simply continued to carry and to function and to show up for the people and the responsibilities that required showing up for. I see that carrying, not just the fact of it, the specific texture of it, the specific combination of faith and fatigue that exists in a person who has been believing for something for long enough that the believing has become its own kind of discipline. Not the easy believing of the early days of a promise when the expectation was fresh and the evidence was not yet required. The believing that persists after the early expectation has given way to something more seasoned. The believing that has been pressed through the experience of partial arrival and the recalibration of what arrival will look like, and the continued choosing to expect the fullness even as the partial has been the sustained experience. That kind of believing is the rarest kind. It is the believing that requires the most from a person and that produces the deepest character. And I want to tell you something about what that character, formed over the years of carrying and believing and persisting in conditions that would have justified stopping, has been building toward. It has been building toward exactly this moment. The moment when the specific provision for the specific gap arrives. The moment when the miracle I have been describing lands in a person who has been formed by the season in a way that makes them ready to receive it at the depth at which it is being offered. You have been in the formation season, and the formation season is ending. I also want to address something specific about what the formation season has produced in you that is directly relevant to what the restoration I am describing will make available. One of the things that the whole brain deficit produces, in addition to the reduction in creative and analytical capacity I have described, is a reduction in the experience of what I will call spiritual clarity. The specific knowing of what you are supposed to do next, in the specific domain where you most need direction, that arrives not through deliberate analysis, but through what the fully integrated mind makes available when both hemispheres are working together and when the intuitive intelligence of the right hemisphere is contributing its full share to the processing of the questions your life is raising. That kind of clarity is not reliably available in the whole brain deficit state. It is reliably available in the whole brain restored state. And the season you have been in, the season of carrying and waiting and believing, has been producing in you a depth of question that the restored clarity will be able to answer with a specificity that the clarity of ordinary analytical thought could not reach. Let me speak to the financial dimension of what you have been carrying. I am naming this specifically because it is often the area where the whole brain deficit has its most concrete and measurable effect on a person in their daily life. Financial decisions require the full range of cognitive function. They require the analytical capacity of the left hemisphere to assess risk and evaluate options and construct projections. They also require the intuitive capacity of the right hemisphere to sense the pattern beneath the surface of the available data, to recognize the opportunity that is not yet obvious, to feel the direction that analysis alone cannot fully determine. When those two contributions are not in full communication with each other, financial decisions carry a quality of incompleteness. The analysis reaches a conclusion, but the conclusion does not carry the full conviction of a decision made from the whole mind. Or the intuition arrives but cannot be adequately evaluated by the analytical faculty operating in isolation. What the restoration produces in the financial domain is decisions that carry both the analytical rigor and the intuitive confidence simultaneously. Lisa described this as the thing that changed first in her professional life. Not the specific financial outcome, though, that followed. The quality of the decision. The sense of operating from a full picture rather than a partial one. Matthew described a similar shift in how he approached the business decisions that had been taking more of him than they should have been taking. The first evidence of the shift was not in the outcomes. It was in the experience of making the decision. And that shift in the experience of deciding, the shift from partial to full access to his own cognitive capacity, is what produced the specific business decision in month 3 that he describes as the turn. I want to speak to the creative dimension as well, not just the professional creativity of the person whose work requires creative output, the creativity that belongs to the living of any life at its full expression, the creativity involved in solving the specific problems that the specific circumstances of your specific life are raising right now, the creativity involved in finding the path through the specific combination of constraints and resources and relationships that makes up the territory of your daily experience. That creativity, the practical and spiritual creativity of navigating a real life with real complexity, is one of the most significant things that whole brain function makes available and that whole brain deficit suppresses. The people I described earlier did not only improve in the areas their professional work touched, they improved in their daily creativity, in their ability to find the path that analysis alone could not find, in their ability to approach the constraints of their life not as walls, but as the specific creative challenge that the fully engaged mind is designed to meet with something more generative than persistence. The whole brain state does not make the constraints disappear. It makes you someone who approaches the constraints with the full cognitive, intuitive, and creative capacity that was present in the beginning. That is a different experience of being alive in a difficult season, and it is what the step I am about to describe makes available to you. I want to name you one more time before I continue building toward the step. You are chosen, not in the generic sense that all people are chosen for something. In the specific sense that your arrival at this conversation, at this specific point in your story, with this specific understanding of the gap you have been living with and this specific readiness to receive the provision for it, was arranged. Not by the algorithm that serves content to the people it predicts will engage with it, by me. Because the person who is chosen for a specific provision is not the person who is most spectacular. It is the person who is most prepared to receive it and most positioned to use it for the purpose I placed in them from the beginning. You are that person right now, and the step that activates the provision is the one I am about to describe. I want to speak now to the part of you that is composing an objection while I speak, not to silence it, to engage it, because the objection that is forming in you right now is not irrational. It is the reasonable response of a person who has been in conversations similar to this one, and who has received things in those conversations that were real and true, and that still did not produce the full outcome that was pointed toward. The objection says something like, I have heard things like this before, I have taken steps before, I have been at the place where the solution was in front of me and I reached for it, and what came back was real but not the fullness that was described. And I am not sure I can sustain the hope that this time is different. I want to engage that objection directly, not by dismissing it, by giving it the right information to work with. The specific things you have tried before, the books and the programs and the spiritual practices and the coaching and the retreats, were not wrong. They were addressing real things. They were producing real movement. What they were not doing, in most cases, was addressing the specific neural mechanism that I have been describing. The whole brain deficit, the root condition that sits beneath the behaviors and the beliefs and the habits and the patterns and that governs what the addressing of those things can produce. You can rebuild behaviors on a foundation of reduced whole brain function and produce better behaviors. What you cannot produce through behavior change alone is the qualitative shift in capacity that whole brain restoration produces. This is the piece that has been missing. Not effort, not sincerity, not strategic approach to the specific areas where the gap has been most visible. The specific intervention at the specific level that addresses the root. And the reason the missing piece has been missing is not that you failed to find it. It is that it has not been widely available in the popular conversation about why effort does not always convert to outcome at the level the effort deserves. The science has been in the laboratory. The tool that translates the science into a practical daily practice has only recently existed in the form that Dr. Barone created. You were not missing the piece because you were not looking. The piece was not yet in the places where looking would have found it. I want to speak to the question of whether this is just the next version of a category of promises that have not delivered. I understand the question. I understand the weariness that produces it. And I want to engage the question not with reassurance alone, but with structure. Because structure, in this specific case, is more useful than reassurance. The structure I want to point to is the guarantee. The full, unconditional, no questions asked money-back guarantee that accompanies every access to the sequence I have been describing. I have said this before and I am going to say it again here because it is the piece of the structure that makes the question of whether to try this fundamentally different from the question of whether to try the things you have tried before. When you tried the other things, you took a financial risk. You paid in advance for the outcome that was described. If the outcome did not arrive, the money did not return. That structure means that the question of whether to try carries genuine financial risk, and that genuine financial risk appropriately increases the caution with which the decision is made. The structure of what I am describing today is different. The guarantee means that the financial risk in the decision is zero. You pay only if you experience what I described. The cost of finding out whether the description matches reality is $39 held in reserve until you have confirmed the match. If you confirm it, you have paid $39 for the beginning of the restoration of the full operation of the mind I gave you. If you do not confirm it, you receive every dollar back. That structure should change how you relate to the objection that is forming. The objection is appropriate in a structure where the risk is real. In a structure where the risk is zero, the objection is protecting you from something that cannot hurt you. And a protection that prevents you from something that cannot hurt you is not protection. It is the pattern I have been describing. The narrowing of access to the full capacity of your own life, expressing itself in the specific domain of your relationship to the possibility of a step that carries no financial risk. I want to speak to something that runs even deeper than the financial risk calculation. I want to speak to the emotional risk, the risk of hope, because for many people who have been in the season I have been describing, the cost of hope that does not fully arrive is not measured in dollars. It is measured in the specific kind of depletion that comes from having been moved and having reached and having believed and having experienced the return of something less than the fullness that was believed for. That depletion is real. It is not weakness. It is the reasonable response of a whole and sensitive person to the experience of sustained partial arrival. And I want to say something specific to the part of you that is protecting against that depletion right now. The protection you have built is understandable. I am not asking you to put it down permanently. I am asking you to put it down for the length of the decision and the length of the testing period. The guarantee means that the testing period is financially free, and I am asking you to extend yourself the permission to find out within that financially free testing period whether what I am describing becomes your experience. Not to decide in advance that it will, not to override the protection with forced optimism, simply to allow the evidence to speak before the protection closes the door on a provision that I arranged specifically for the gap the protection has been guarding. Let me say one more thing about the word miracle in the context of this objection. I used it to describe what I am calling you to witness, and I want to engage the possibility that the word itself is part of what the objection is responding to. That the bigger the word, the more guarded the response. I understand that pattern, and I want to say something about why I chose the word anyway, knowing that it might trigger that pattern in someone who has been through what you have been through. The word miracle does not require the outcome to be impossible. It requires the outcome to be what could not have been produced by the ordinary conditions of the ordinary life without a specific intervention. The whole brain restoration I have been describing is not something that happens through ordinary conditions. The ordinary conditions produce the deficit. The restoration requires the specific intervention that addresses the specific mechanism the ordinary conditions affected. When a specific intervention produces a restoration that the ordinary conditions could not have produced, the word that belongs to the outcome is miracle, not because it is impossible, because it is the provision of something that the natural course of things would not have delivered. That is what miracle means. And that is what you are being invited to witness today. Comment the word open below if you are willing to let the provision speak for itself. Not committed, not certain, simply open to the evidence. That is all I am asking right now. The openness is the first step. The specific step, the one with the link and the price and the guarantee, comes after, but the openness has to come first. The willingness to allow the possibility that this specific provision, at this specific moment, for this specific person, is the thing that the other things were building toward rather than the next version of what they were. I believe it is. And I believe it not as a sales strategy, but as the statement of what I see when I look at what I arranged for you today and what I see when I look at you receiving it. The arrangement fits the person. The provision fits the gap. And the miracle I open this conversation by naming is the word that belongs to the coincidence of all of those things being in the same place at the same time, which they are, right now, before this day ends. I want to paint a picture for you, not an abstract picture, a specific one, a picture of 90 days from today, in the life of the person who takes the step I am describing before this day ends. I want to describe what the experience is like to be that person at that point in time, not as aspiration, but as the documented trajectory of the people who have already traveled it. 90 days from today, if you take the step, you will have been using the 8-minute sequence every morning for roughly 3 months. Not perfectly. Some mornings will have been skipped. Some will have felt routine rather than charged with significance. But the cumulative effect of the practice, even with the inevitable inconsistencies of a real life, will have produced a baseline shift that you will be able to feel and that the people who know you will be able to observe. The shift will not be in the category of things you are doing differently. It will be in the category of who you are being while you do them. The version of you that shows up to every situation you encounter will carry more of the full capacity I placed in you from the beginning, more of the analytical clarity, more of the intuitive confidence, more of the creative fluency, more of the presence and integration that whole brain function produces in a person who has returned to it after years of operating below it. In your financial life, 90 days is enough time for the first significant evidence of the shift to become visible in the decisions you are making and in the quality of the thinking you are bringing to those decisions. Not necessarily a dramatic outcome yet, but a change in the texture of how you approach the decisions that carry financial consequence. A change in the confidence with which your analysis arrives at a conclusion. A change in the speed at which the picture clarifies when you are looking at a financial situation that previously would have required more of you to resolve than the resolution seemed to justify. And if you are someone who has been carrying a specific financial need, a specific circumstance where the right decision has been slow to become clear, 90 days of the restored whole brain function I am describing will change how that situation presents itself to you. In your relationships, 90 days is the period in which the people who are closest to you will have noticed the change before you have fully articulated it. This is one of the consistent patterns that emerges from the testimonies of the people who have taken this step. The change in their inner experience arrives first, then the change in their behavior and their presence in relationship arrives, and then, before they have described to the people around them what they have been doing or why something feels different, those people begin commenting that something has shifted. Matthew described this specifically. His wife noticed the change in how he was showing up to their conversations before he had mentioned the practice to her. His children noticed, not because he had been present in the conventional sense of trying harder to be present, because the quality of whole brain engagement that the practice was restoring was producing a presence that did not require effort to sustain. In your creative life, 90 days is the period in which the specific projects and ideas and directions that have been forming beneath the surface of your ordinary life, the ones that have been present in embryo but that have not had the full incubation environment they needed to fully form, begin moving. Not all of them. The ones that are most ready for the full expression that the restored whole brain function makes available. The creative ideas that have been too large for the partial access to your capacity that has been available will begin to feel sized for the access that 90 days of the practice has expanded. And the specific creative work you have been carrying the longest, the work that has been waiting for the version of you that could hold it fully and move it forward fully, will begin receiving the version of you that was built for it. In your sense of purpose, 90 days is the period in which the vague but persistent sense of being made for more, which has been present throughout the whole season I have been describing, begins to clarify into a more specific knowing. Not the complete map of the entire path, the knowing of the next thing, the specific next direction, the specific next conversation or project or decision that aligns with the purpose I placed in you from the beginning, and that the partial whole brain function of the recent season has been unable to render clearly enough to act on. With confidence, the restored function renders it more clearly, and clarity is what enables movement toward what was always the intended direction. I want to say something about what the 90-day picture means in the context of the miracle I opened this conversation with. 90 days is not the completion of the miracle, it is the early evidence of it. The miracle, fully expressed, is not a 90-day story. It is the story of a life that has been returned to the full operation of the capacity I built into it from the beginning, played out across every season of that life from the moment of the restoration forward. The 90 days is the first chapter of that story, the first chapter in which the shift from partial to full access begins producing visible and specific evidence in the specific areas of your specific life. That first chapter is available to you, beginning today, from the specific step that is in the description of this video, and the miracle I called you to witness is the entirety of what that first chapter opens into. Not just the 90-day picture, the full story of the life that begins when the capacity I placed in you from the beginning becomes available to be fully expressed. That is what the congratulations at the beginning of this conversation was pointing toward. That is the miracle, and the door to it is in the description below. I want to say something specific about the area of health in the 90-day picture, because health is one of the areas where the connection between the neural shift and the visible life outcome is least obvious and most significant. The research on the relationship between whole brain coherence and nervous system regulation is consistent across multiple decades of study. When the brain moves toward greater integration between hemispheres, the autonomic nervous system moves toward greater regulation. The chronic activation of the stress response, that is, the companion of the fragmented left-dominant brain state, the state that most modern adults are in as their default condition, begins to reduce as the cross-hemisphere coordination is restored, and the physical effects of reduced chronic stress activation are measurable and significant. Better sleep is almost universally one of the first things people report. Better digestion, reduced baseline tension in the body, a general improvement in the quality of physical well-being that does not require a specific medical intervention and that most people describe as the recovery of something that feels like what they used to feel like before the years of chronic stress took what they took. I also want to say something about the health of your relationships in a way I have not yet addressed. The emotional intelligence that whole brain function produces is not the intelligence of someone who has studied how to be emotionally intelligent. It is the intelligence that emerges naturally in a person who is operating from the integrated mind, the ability to be present in a conversation without the cognitive narrowing that whole brain deficit produces, the ability to hold the complexity of what another person is communicating without reducing it to what the analytical mind alone can process, the ability to respond from the full self rather than from the fraction of the full self that has been available. These qualities, which are the qualities of the person you most want to be in the relationships that matter most to you, are the natural expression of the restored whole brain state. I want to close this section with a real question. If the 90-day picture I just described were confirmed as your experience, what would it mean for the specific season you are in right now? What specific thing would change? What specific prayer would begin to be answered differently? What specific relationship would shift? Hold that picture, because what comes next is the information that bridges between the picture and the step. Let me pray over you right now, not as a conclusion, as a continuation, as the most direct form of what I want to say to you at this specific moment in this specific conversation. I see you. I see where you started this conversation and where you are right now in it. I see the things that have been moving in you as I have spoken, the recognition of the gap I described, the specific resonance of the stories I named. The question about whether this is real and whether it is for you. The hope that has been rising cautiously alongside the protection that has developed across the season of partial arrival. I see all of it, and I want to speak into all of it with the authority I have as the one who made you and who arranged this conversation for this specific day in your specific story. I declare over your mind that the narrowing is ending, not gradually with no clear point of turn, with a specific point of turn, this day, this conversation, the step that comes at the end of it. I declare that the cross-hemisphere coordination that was present in the beginning and that was gradually reduced by the conditions of the years that followed is being restored, not because you have finally earned it, not because you have achieved a sufficient level of spiritual maturity or professional success or relational health, because I arranged the specific provision for the specific gap and I placed it in your path today, and the arrangement is the declaration. The provision itself is the announcement of what I have decided about your capacity and your next season. I declare over your finances that the decisions that have been slow to clarity are beginning to resolve, not because your financial situation has changed, because the mind that navigates your financial situation is changing. The analytical clarity that whole brain function produces is returning to the level I designed it to operate at, and the intuitive confidence that the right hemisphere contributes to financial decision-making, the sense that is more than analysis, and that the person who has been operating from reduced whole brain function has not had reliable access to, is coming back online. The financial story I see for you from the other side of the step you are about to take is not the same story as the financial story of the season behind you. I declare over your relationships that the walls that formed without your consent are coming down, that the presence you have wanted to bring to the conversations that matter most to you is becoming available, that the emotional and relational intelligence that is the natural expression of the integrated mind is being restored to the level at which it can do the work that the relationships in your life require of it, that the people who need the fully engaged version of you are going to begin receiving more of the fully engaged version of you than the season behind you made available to give them. I declare over your purpose that the specific knowing of what you are called to do and who you are called to serve and what you were placed here to build is coming into a clarity that the season behind you could not produce, not because the purpose has changed, because the whole brain function that allows purpose to be received, evaluated, planned for, and moved toward with the full complement of your cognitive and intuitive capacity is being restored. The purpose I placed in you was always there. The restoration brings the access to it that was being reduced by the condition I described, and when access returns, what has been forming in you through the years of carrying it finally has the mind it needs to move. I want to name you one more time before I move to the practical information about the step. You are a cycle breaker. I said this in the way I say things when I mean them fully and precisely, not as encouragement but as designation. The patterns that have run through the generations of your family, the patterns of reaching a level and then stopping at the same wall, the patterns of carrying capacity that never fully expressed, the patterns of believing for what did not arrive in the fullness it was believed for, those patterns stop with you. They stop not because you are stronger than those who came before you. They stop because you are the one who was positioned at this specific moment with this specific understanding of the mechanism and this specific access to the step that the mechanism requires. The people before you in your line did not have what you have today. They did not have the name for what was reducing their access to the full capacity I placed in them. They did not have the science that confirms the name. They did not have the specific tool that addresses the mechanism the science describes. They did not have the guarantee that removes the financial risk of finding out whether the tool does what the science predicts. You have all of those things, right now, before this day ends. That is the difference between you and every generation that carried the gap before you, and that difference is the reason the pattern stops with you. I want to dwell on the cycle-breaking declaration for a moment longer, because it is one of the most significant things I will say in this entire conversation, and I want to make sure you receive it with the full weight it is intended to carry. When I say the pattern stops with you, I am not describing something that happens automatically because you arrived at this conversation. I am describing something that happens when you take the step that converts the understanding into the action. The understanding alone is not cycle-breaking. The knowledge that the gap has a mechanism and the mechanism has a solution is not, by itself, the break. The break is the action. The willingness to move on the understanding before the season that the understanding is embedded in has passed and the ordinary conditions of the ordinary day have reclaimed the clarity and the motivation that this conversation has produced. The break is available to you right now, in this specific window, in the space between this message and the end of this day. That is the window the arrangement I am describing was built around. The title of this message was not arbitrary, especially today because the window exists today and not automatically tomorrow, not because the step becomes unavailable tomorrow, because the clarity and the willingness and the specific activation of desire for the restoration that this conversation has produced in you exists right now, in this moment, and the ordinary conditions of the ordinary day will begin to reclaim it the moment this conversation ends, if the action is not taken before then. The step is the act that converts the window into the turn. I want to speak one final thing in this section before we move to the specific information about the step. I want to speak to what it means for the people who come after you if you take the step today. Your children, your grandchildren, the people who will inherit not just your name but the neural pattern that you carry through the line. The whole brain deficit I have been describing is not only an individual condition, it is a condition that is transmitted through the environment of a childhood and through the modeling of the adults who shape that environment. A parent who is operating from the full capacity of the mind I gave them models, a quality of thinking and presence and creative engagement with the world that becomes the standard for the children who grow up in that environment. A parent operating from the reduced capacity of the whole brain deficit models the reduced capacity as the normal state of human operation. You are at the point in your story where the choice you make about the step I am describing has consequences that extend beyond your own life into the lives of the people who come after you. Taking the step is cycle breaking at the level of the pattern you have been carrying. It is also modeling, for the next generation, a standard of whole brain engagement with life that they grow up understanding as normal. That is the scale of what is at stake in the decision that is in front of you today. Now, I am going to tell you exactly what the step is. I have been building toward it through everything I have said in this conversation, and the building was necessary. Without the understanding of the whole brain deficit and what it produces and how the restoration operates, the step would have been a claim. With that understanding, the step is the specific provision for a specifically described condition that you now know by name, and the name of the specific provision is the genius switch. I named it earlier in this conversation. I want to give you the complete description now. The genius switch is an 8-minute auditory sequence delivered through headphones that uses neural sync technology, a specific method of combining auditory signals developed by Dr. Daniel Barone from his clinical neuroscience research to produce the cross-hemisphere activation that the research identifies as the neural signature of whole brain function. 8 minutes, headphones, eyes closed, a quiet space. That is the entire input required from you. The sequence does what the science says it does when the brain receives the specific auditory signal it is designed to deliver. The brain does not need to be coached through the response. The response is what the architecture was built to produce when it receives the right input. The sequence is the right input. I want to walk you through what the first week looks like, not the 90-day picture I described earlier, which is the full expression of what the cumulative practice produces, the first 7 days. Because the first 7 days are what most people encounter when they are deciding whether to continue, and I want you to know what to expect so that what you encounter in the first 7 days is received with the right frame rather than the wrong one. In the first use, most people report something that is best described as a deepening of the rest quality of whatever follows the 8 minutes, not a dramatic shift in mental state during the sequence. A quality of quiet in the aftermath that is noticeably different from the quality of quiet that a cup of coffee or a few minutes of sitting still produces. The brain, having received the neural sync signal, is in a state of slightly elevated cross-hemisphere coordination. This produces a subtle but real change in the texture of the attention that is available in the hours following the 8 minutes. Ideas arrive a little closer to the surface. The mental friction that ordinary analytical engagement requires is slightly reduced. Most people describe this as unremarkable in the first use. Worth noticing, not extraordinary. By the third or fourth use, the subtle change has become something the person can name with more confidence, not placebo, not the ordinary variation in cognitive clarity that a good night of sleep produces. Something different in kind. The specific quality of access to ideas and connections and decisions that the research describes as the characteristic experience of elevated cross-hemisphere coordination. The person begins to recognize the difference between the state that follows the sequence and the state that does not. And that recognition is what motivates the continuation of the practice, not as discipline but as evidence-based preference. You continue because you can tell the difference. And the difference gets clearer and more significant as the practice accumulates. By the end of the first week, the shift is recognizable enough that most people describe it as the thing that made them confident they were going to continue. Not a transformed life, a changed baseline, a different quality of mind available as the starting point of each day. The decisions of the week carry a slightly different character. The creative thinking of the week has a different fluency. The emotional regulation of the week, the capacity to stay present and integrated in the conversations and situations that require the most of a person, is measurably better, not perfected, better, and better in the specific way that the research describes as the early evidence of restored whole brain function. I want to tell you about the 4 bonuses that come with what you access through the link in the description below, not because the bonuses are the reason to take the step. The sequence itself is the reason to take the step. But the bonuses extend and support what the sequence initiates in ways that are worth understanding before you encounter them. The first bonus is a guided visualization developed by a top-rated practitioner that is specifically designed to be used in the whole brain state the sequence produces. The whole brain state is the optimal state for the kind of vivid, specific, inhabiting the future visualization that the research on mental rehearsal shows is most effective. The visualization guides you through the specific future you are believing for in the areas of health, finances, relationships, and purpose, from the mental state that gives the visualization its full effect. The second bonus is a nutrition guide, not a diet plan. A specific and practical guide to the 10 most common foods in an ordinary American grocery store that research consistently associates with the kind of neural inflammation and fog that counteracts the cross-hemisphere clarity. Sequence is designed to build, and alongside that, 5 specific grocery strategies that reduce your monthly food spending by over $100 while moving you toward the nutritional environment that supports rather than undermines what you are building. The third bonus is a classic text, over 100 years old, that Dr. Barone includes because he believes it is most fully received in the whole brain state the sequence produces. The fourth bonus is a printable 1-page visual reference outlining the 5 daily habits most consistently associated with the life transformation you are reaching for. All 4 bonuses are included, no additional cost. One access through the link in the description below provides the sequence, all 4 bonuses, and lifetime access. And all of it is protected by a 100% money-back guarantee that I have described before and that I am describing again here because it is the provision that removes the financial risk from the decision entirely. The risk of finding out whether what I have described becomes your experience is 0. The risk of not finding out is the continuation of the gap I described. I want to say something about the moment of the decision that I think is important before you encounter it. The moment of the decision is not the moment you feel fully confident. It is not the moment the protection disappears. It is not the moment the fear of the emotional risk of hope resolves itself. The moment of the decision, for most people who take this step, is the moment they decide that the specific structure of this offer, a zero-risk financial transaction, a specific neural mechanism, a science-backed tool, a community of over 18,000 people who report the experience I described, is sufficient reason to allow the protection to step back for the length of one action. One click, one payment of $39, one beginning of the 8 minutes. That moment is available to you right now. You are in it. The window is open. The link is in the description. The guarantee is in place. The question of whether what I have described becomes your experience is one action away from beginning to be answered today. In the specific clarity that this conversation has produced, the decision is right here. That moment is available to you right now. You are in it. The window that the arrangement I described is built around is open. The link is in the description. The guarantee is in place. The question of whether what I have described becomes your experience is one action away from beginning to be answered. Not eventually, today. Not after you have had more time to think about it. In the specific clarity that this conversation has produced, before the ordinary conditions of the ordinary day begin to reclaim what this conversation opened. The decision is right here, and the only thing between you and the step is the willingness to allow the evidence to speak. I want to say one thing about the price before I continue. The price available through the link today is $39, not $500, which was the initial professional valuation, not $49, which was the first public price. $39 today through the link below. For the sequence, the bonuses, the lifetime access, and the guarantee. That is the complete offer. And the decision in front of you is simpler than any decision you have made in a long time. If you have just joined this conversation, I want to welcome you and give you the essential summary of what has been said before you arrived. Not because the summary replaces what came before, but because I want you to have enough to stay through what is still coming, which is the most important part. I opened this conversation with congratulations. I told you not to tell anyone yet. I told you that I was calling you to witness a miracle, and the miracle I have been describing through this entire conversation is the specific, science-backed restoration of the whole brain function that was your original operating state in the early years of your life, and that has been gradually reduced by the conditions of the modern world you have been living in. The result of that reduction is a gap that most adults carry without knowing its name or its cause, a gap between the capacity they were designed to operate from and the capacity that has been available to them, a gap that shows up as the effort that exceeds the outcome, the sincerity that is not matched by the arrival, the prayers that feel answered at half the depth they were reaching toward. The miracle I am calling you to witness is the specific provision for that gap. A neurologist from New York named Dr. Daniel Barone spent years in the research on what the science says about why some people reach the full expression of what they were designed for, while others carry that design without fully accessing it. What the research showed him is that the answer is neural. Specifically, it is the degree of active coordination between the two hemispheres of the brain. When that coordination is at the level it was designed to operate at, which is the level it was at in childhood, the mind operates at a qualitatively different level. When the coordination has been reduced by the conditions of modern life, the mind operates at the reduced level that most people experience as their ordinary state, and that most people interpret as the limit of their capacity when it is actually the limit of their access. Dr. Barone built the specific tool that the research points to as the intervention that restores the coordination. It is an 8-minute auditory sequence delivered through headphones that uses a technology called neural sync to produce the specific auditory signal that the neural system responds to with the restoration of cross-hemisphere activation. 8 minutes a day. That is the practice. That is what begins the restoration. That is the miracle I called you to witness. And the link in the description of this video is where you access it. Today, before this day ends, which is why I said especially today. I want to say something about the word congratulations in the context of what I have just described. I said it at the beginning because something has been decided. The provision has been arranged. The miracle has been placed in your path, not eventually, today, on this specific day in your specific story, and the appropriate response to that arrangement, from where I am standing and from what I can see about what it means for your specific life and your specific season, is the word that opens with celebration. Congratulations. Not because you have already taken the step, because the provision is in front of you and the step is within your reach, and the arrangement of those two things is the declaration of what I have decided about your next season. I want to speak to something specific about what it means that this conversation was placed in your path today. The algorithm that delivers content in this format delivers it based on patterns of engagement, on what a person has been watching and searching for and spending time with in the digital environment where this message lives. And I want to say something about the pattern that led this specific message to you on this specific day. The pattern is not accidental. The pattern was shaped by a sustained attention to the gap I have been describing. The attention that produces the search behavior that produces the pattern that produces the delivery of this message is the attention of a person who has been genuinely and sincerely seeking. And the seeker and the provision have arrived at the same place at the same time today. That is what the congratulations was announcing. I want to tell you about the price because I have mentioned it earlier in this conversation, and I want to make sure it is stated plainly for the person who has just joined and has not heard it yet. The price for accessing what Dr. Barone built through the link in the description of this video is $39, not the $500 that colleagues who understood what he built said it would be worth, not the $49 at which it was first made available to the public. $39 today for this conversation through this specific link, and the $39 is protected by a full, unconditional money-back guarantee. If you access the sequence, give it the time the research indicates it requires to produce the shift, and do not experience what I have described, you contact Dr. Barone and his team and every dollar is returned. No questions, no partial credit, every dollar. This means the structure of the decision in front of you is simple. $39 held in reserve for the duration of the testing period. The testing period produces your experience. If the experience confirms what I described, you have paid $39 for the beginning of the restoration of the full operation of the mind I gave you. If it does not confirm it, you return to exactly the financial position you were in before the step. There is no scenario in which taking the step makes you worse off than not taking it. The only scenario in which not taking the step is rational is the scenario in which you have decided in advance that the experience cannot be what I described, which is the protection deciding for the evidence before the evidence has spoken. I want to name the specific thing I am asking you to do right now, not at the end of this conversation. Right now, I am asking you to make a decision in your own mind about whether you are willing to allow the evidence to speak, not a commitment to buy, not a decision to trust without testing. The decision that the specific structure of this offer, a zero-risk financial transaction for a science-backed tool with a community of over 18,000 people confirming the experience, is sufficient reason to find out for yourself whether what I have described is your experience. That decision, made internally before the end of this conversation, is what makes the step at the end easy, and the step at the end is the step that begins everything I have been describing. Comment yes below if you have made that decision, not as performance, as the internal statement that you are willing to find out, that you are bringing the protection down enough to allow the evidence in, that you are choosing the possibility of the provision over the certainty of the continuation of the gap. Comment yes, and then stay for what comes next. Because what comes next is the declaration that this entire conversation has been building toward. The declaration I have been holding for this moment in the conversation is not a generic blessing. It is a specific statement about a specific person in a specific season with a specific provision in front of them, and I want to give it to you with the full weight of what it is supposed to carry. You are not at the end of what was promised. You are at the beginning of what was always intended. The season you have been in, the long season of carrying more than was coming through, the long season of effort that produced less than the effort deserved, the long season of praying with sincerity for what did not arrive at the fullness it was reaching toward, that season was not the definition of your story. It was the preparation of a person who is now standing at the specific place where the specific provision has been placed, and the provision is in front of you right now. In the description below this video, at the cost of $39 and 8 minutes a day, I want to declare over your mind that the ceiling is coming off, not the ceiling you put up, the one that formed without your knowledge or your consent, as the cross-hemisphere coordination I described was reduced by the conditions of the life you have been living. That ceiling was not your design. It was the accumulated effect of a world that demanded less than the full operation of the mind I gave you, and that gradually adjusted your neural system to the demand. The restoration of the full demand, the restoration of the whole brain state that I designed to be your operating standard, removes the ceiling, not permanently, as a declaration that requires no daily practice, as the cumulative result of 8 minutes a day of the specific signal that the neural system responds to with the activation of the architecture I built for you. I want to declare over your relationships that the fullness you have been trying to bring to them and that has been coming through at partial capacity is about to have the full capacity available. Not because you will love more or care more or commit more, because the neural integration that makes love and care and commitment fully expressible in the moment when the relationships that matter most to you require the expression will be available. The person who shows up to the relationships that matter most to them from the whole brain state shows up differently. Not louder, not more strategically, more fully present, and full presence in a relationship is the thing that most people who love the people around them have been reaching for and that the whole brain deficit has been making harder to sustain than it was designed to be. I want to declare over your finances that the ideas that have been forming below the surface of your ordinary life are about to find the architecture that can hold them and build them and move them toward the expression they were designed for. Not generic financial blessing, the specific creative and analytical capacity required to see the opportunity, evaluate it clearly, move toward it with confidence, and build what needs to be built to bring it into reality. Those capacities are the expression of the whole brain state. They have been present in you but partially muffled by the deficit. The restoration brings them online at the level I designed them to operate at. I want to declare over your sense of purpose that the specific clarity you have been seeking about the specific next thing you are supposed to do with your specific life is arriving, not a vague sense that more is available. The specific knowing, the specific direction, the specific next step in the specific purpose I placed in you from the beginning. That clarity belongs to the fully integrated mind, to the mind that has both the analytical capacity to assess and plan and the intuitive capacity to sense and receive. Both are being restored. And when both are available simultaneously, what has been a persistent but unclear sense of calling begins to arrive as a specific and actionable knowing. These declarations are not the wishful language of encouragement. They are the description of what the research shows becomes available when the specific condition I have been describing is addressed with the specific intervention that addresses it. They are the description of what Lisa and Matthew and Ellie began experiencing within weeks of taking the step. They are the description of what over 18,000 people have reported as the trajectory their lives took when the whole brain restoration I have been describing began through the practice I have named. And they are the declaration of what I see for your life from the position I hold as the one who designed you for this specific capacity and who arranged this specific provision for this specific gap at this specific moment in your story. I want to speak to what happens on the day after the step. Most people, when they imagine taking the step, focus on the moment of the transaction, the click, the payment, the access. And what I want you to know is that the day after the step is the day the declaration over your life begins to be specific rather than general, not because the transformation is complete in 24 hours, because the direction has been established. The practice has begun, the first 8-minute sequence has been completed. And in the clarity and the quiet and the slight but real shift in the quality of the rest that follows the first sequence, something in the internal environment of your daily life has registered that a specific step has been taken, that the seeking has been met with a specific action, that the prayer has been met with the beginning of the receiving. The day after the step is the day the process I described begins to accumulate, not the 90-day picture, not the life change that the full expression of the cumulative practice produces. The beginning, the first evidence, the first confirmation that what I described about how the neural system responds to the specific signal of the 8-minute sequence is not a promise without evidence behind it, but a specific mechanism that your own neural system is now demonstrating within your own daily experience. That confirmation is what makes the day after the step different from the day before it, and that difference is what the $39 is purchasing, not a product. The beginning of a confirmation that what I said about what you are capable of and what your mind was designed to access and what the restoration produces in a life like yours is true. I am not speaking into the future as if it is speculative. I am speaking into the future as the one who has already decided what is available there. The decision about your next season has been made. What I am waiting for is your movement toward what has been decided. The movement is one step. The step is the link. The link is in the description. And the description is right below this video. What I am asking you to do is go there now, before this conversation ends. Before the ordinary day reclaims the clarity and the motivation and the specific activation of desire for the restoration that this conversation has produced in you. I want to speak to what it means to take the step in the context of the word I opened this conversation with. Congratulations was not premature. I said it at the beginning knowing that the step had not yet been taken, knowing that the provision had not yet been received, knowing that the miracle I was calling you to witness was on the other side of a decision you had not yet made. And I said it anyway, because from my position, the arrangement and the provision and the step and the person standing in front of them are already the miracle. The taking of the step confirms the miracle. But the miracle was arranged before the step. What the step does is allow the miracle to express itself in the specific dimensions of your specific life. The step is the act that opens the channel through which what has been arranged flows into what is experienced. And the channel is available, right now. through the link in the description below. I am asking you to open it before this day ends, before tomorrow arrives carrying the same conditions as today without the specific provision that today contains. Go to the description, click the link, take the step, and come back and comment what happens. I want to return to the phrase I used at the beginning of this conversation, especially today. I said it before I had explained any of what I have spent this entire conversation explaining, and I want to close the loop on it now by telling you what I meant by it and why the especially matters in this specific moment in your story. The neural architecture that was your original operating state is not frozen at whatever reduced level of coordination it has reached in the years of ordinary modern life. The research that Dr. Barone built his work on shows that the neural system is plastic, that it responds to input, that it changes in response to the signals it receives. And the implication of that plasticity is that the restoration of the whole brain coordination I have been describing is not a thing that some people can access and others cannot. It is a thing that becomes accessible when the specific input that produces the restoration is received by a neural system that is plastic and responsive and designed to coordinate at the level it was at in the early years, which is what every adult was, and what every adult remains in the plasticity of their neural architecture, regardless of how long the reduction has been occurring. Especially today means that the specific provision that uses the neural plasticity I just described to produce the specific restoration I have been describing is in front of you today, through a link in the description below this video for $39, with a 100% money-back guarantee, on this specific day in your specific season. Not as a general truth about the availability of the restoration, but as a specific fact about what is in front of you in this moment. I want to speak to the specific meaning of, especially today, for the person who has been waiting, who has been asking for provision and waiting for it to arrive, who has been carrying the gap I described with a sustained confidence that what was promised was going to be delivered, but with a growing exhaustion from the length of the waiting season. To that person, especially today, is not a sales technique. It is the announcement that the waiting season has delivered, that what was coming has arrived, that the provision that was being held in reserve for the right moment has been placed in front of the right person at a moment that qualifies as the right moment because of the length and sincerity and sustained confidence of the waiting that preceded it. I want to speak to the specific shape of Lisa's story because I think it carries something important about the kind of evidence that matters most when a person is deciding whether to take a step like the one I have been describing in this conversation. Lisa is a graphic designer from San Diego, which means her work depends simultaneously on technical skill and creative intuition, the ability to execute in the tools of her craft and the ability to access the original thinking that makes the execution matter. And what Lisa described before the restoration was the specific exhaustion of creative work that draws on a kind of imaginative access that the whole brain deficit makes intermittent rather than reliable. Some days the ideas would come easily. Some days the technical skill was present, but the ideas would not surface at the depth the work required. And the unpredictability of the access was its own source of professional anxiety. After 8 weeks of the practice, Lisa described a shift in the reliability of the creative access, not a permanent open channel with no variation, a different baseline from which the variation occurs, a different floor. The days when the access was difficult were less difficult than before. The days when the access was easy were richer than the easy days before the practice. And the overall output of her creative work in the 8 weeks since the practice began exceeded by a measure she could quantify in delivered client projects the output of the comparable 8 weeks before. The whole brain state is the creative state, and the restoration of the whole brain state is the restoration of the creative floor that the specific conditions of modern life had been lowering without her knowledge or consent. I want to say something about Ellie from Manhattan too, because her experience contains the dimension of this that most people carry but least often name. Ellie was a clinical social worker, which means her daily professional demand was the capacity to be fully present to people who are in pain, to hold the complexity of their experience without either distance or merger, and to maintain the sustained empathetic attention that makes the clinical relationship effective. And what Ellie described before the restoration was the specific experience of the capacity for that presence depleting over the course of a week at a rate that required a full weekend of recovery to rebuild. She loved her work. The depletion was not about the work, It was about the neural cost of sustained empathetic presence from a brain that was operating below the integration level it was designed to sustain that demand from. After 10 weeks of the practice, Ellie described a qualitative change in what the sustained presence cost her. Not zero cost, a different cost. The kind of cost that recovers overnight rather than requiring a full weekend. The difference between a resource that is being drawn from a smaller reservoir at the same rate and a resource that is being drawn from a larger one. And her description of that difference is the description of what the research says about the relationship between cross-hemisphere coordination and the kind of integrative neural demand that empathetic professional presence represents. The whole brain state sustains what the fragmented state depletes, and the restoration is the return to the state that the sustaining was designed to come from. I want to mention specifically the over 18,000 people who have taken the step that I am describing in this conversation, because their experience is the most direct evidence available about what the step produces in the specific conditions of an adult life in the ordinary world. Not people in controlled research environments. People in the specific conditions of modern adult life, with jobs and relationships and financial pressures and daily demands and a complex and real emotional life, who took the 8-minute practice into the conditions of their actual life and who report the specific changes in the quality of their thinking and their creating and their relationships and their purpose-related clarity that the research predicts the restoration of whole brain coordination produces. The over 18,000 number is not a marketing claim. It is the count of people who have accessed what is available through the link I keep mentioning and who have remained in the community and contributed their experience to the record of what the restoration produces. Not people who bought and never reported back. People who bought, used the practice in their real life, and came back to describe what their real life showed them. And the pattern of what they described is the pattern I have been describing in this conversation. The pattern of a gap being addressed by a specific provision that the science supports and that the experience confirms. I want to tell you about Matthew from Houston, because his experience contains something specific about this that most people who are watching this conversation carry, but do not often name out loud. Matthew was a manager in a professional environment that required him to bring both analytical precision and interpersonal fluency to the same moments every day. The ability to assess data clearly and the ability to read and lead people at the same time. And what Matthew described before he took the step was a specific kind of friction that had been part of his daily experience for so long that he had begun to interpret it as the nature of the work rather than as a symptom of anything that could be addressed. The friction was this: when the analytical demand of a situation was highest, the interpersonal clarity would reduce. When the relational complexity of a moment required his full attention, the analytical precision would step back, not completely, not in a way that made him ineffective, in a way that made him less effective than he believed he should be, and less effective than he had been in the earlier years of his career. And the gap between the level at which he was operating and the level at which he believed he was designed to operate had been a source of a quiet, persistent professional frustration for long enough that he had begun to consider it a permanent feature of his professional experience. After 6 weeks of the 8-minute practice, Matthew described something that he said he had not experienced since the early years of his career: the feeling of the analytical and interpersonal capacities being simultaneously available, not competing for the same mental bandwidth but drawing from a shared resource that was large enough to supply both at the same moment. The specific experience of whole brain function in the specific professional context that required exactly that. And his description of it is the description of what the research says becomes available when the cross-hemisphere coordination is restored to the level it was operating at before the conditions of adult professional life reduced. It not a vary. What changed for Matthew was not his knowledge base or his skill level or his commitment to the work. Those things were already strong. What changed was the access. The quality of the channel through which what he already knew and cared about and was capable of could flow into the specific moment that required it. And that is exactly the distinction I want you to hold as you consider what the step I am describing would mean for your specific life. Not that you are lacking the knowledge or the values or the capacity. You have those things. The question is whether the access to those things in the specific moments that require them most is as reliable and complete as the design calls for. And the research says that for most adults the answer is no, and the research also says why and what addresses it. I want to tell you what is happening in the comments of this video and in the community of people who have taken the step I have been describing, not as a social proof mechanism, as a report on what the experience of the people who have already moved from the description to the reality has produced in their own words and in their own life context. Because the description I have been giving you is my description of what becomes available when the restoration occurs. And the words of the people who are living it are the confirmation of that description in the language of ordinary life. What people describe in the earliest weeks is not the dramatic, it is the texture, the quality of the morning before the demands of the day begin, the quality of the thinking available in the first 2 hours after the 8-minute practice, the quality of the attention available in the conversations that matter most, the specific and verifiable shift in what the day starts from before the habit of thought accumulates and the ordinary conditions of modern life begin to reclaim what the sequence opened. And those descriptions are not the descriptions of a supplement or a motivational method or a temporary state produced by excitement about a new thing. They are the descriptions of a baseline that is shifting, of a floor that is rising, of a different starting point for the day that compounds as the practice accumulates. I want to give you a specific example of the kind of comment that the community generates in the weeks after the step is taken. A person who describes themselves as a writer in the comment section of the community wrote this. She said that she had been writing for 12 years and had never lacked the desire or the discipline, but had always experienced her best work as something that came when the conditions were right, rather than as something she could reliably access when the work required it. She said that after the first 30 days of the practice, for the first time in 12 years, the access to what she described as the depth below the words felt available when she sat down rather than requiring the specific conditions of inspiration that had made the best work feel like a gift rather than a skill. That shift is the shift that the research describes as the characteristic experience of sustained, creative access from the whole brain state. And her description of it is the confirmation of the research in the language of a person who has lived inside the gap I described and who is now beginning to live outside it. The practice is 8 minutes. The access is the rest of the day, and the rest of the day, lived from the whole brain baseline rather than the reduced baseline, is a different kind of day than the one most people have accepted as the ordinary version. The link in the description below this video is where the different kind of day begins. Today, through one $39 step, with the guarantee that removes the risk from finding out. I want to speak to the person who has been watching this conversation from a protected distance. The person who has found the content resonant and has felt the pull of what I have been describing, but who has a specific internal voice that tends to speak at exactly the moments when a provision is being described. The voice that says, I have tried things before and they have not produced what was promised. The voice that says, the evidence sounds compelling, but I have found evidence compelling before. The voice that says, I want to believe this, but the wanting to believe is itself something I have learned not to trust without a higher standard of proof. To that person, I want to say 2 things. The first is that the voice is not wrong. The standard of proof that significant life change requires has been raised by the experience of reaching toward things that promise change and not receiving it. The standard is higher now, and the specific structure of the provision I have been describing was built for a person whose standard is higher now. A money-back guarantee removes the financial risk from the test. A specific neural mechanism grounded in peer-reviewed research replaces the mechanism-free claim. A community of over 18,000 people with reported outcomes replaces the testimonial vacuum. The standard is higher and the provision was built to meet the higher standard. The second thing I want to say to that person is about the specific internal voice that is speaking. That voice is protection. It formed because protection was needed. It was right to form. And the standard it has set for what qualifies as sufficient evidence to allow hope back in is a standard that the provision in front of you meets. The voice that says, prove, it has been given specific proof, neural mechanism, clinical research, specific testimonials, community of 18,000, full money-back guarantee. The specific structure of a provision that was not designed to bypass the protection, but to satisfy it with actual evidence. You do not have to suppress the voice. You do not have to override the protection. You can let the voice assess the specific evidence that this specific provision offers and come to the conclusion that the evidence warrants. And I believe that when the voice assesses the actual structure of the provision, the specific mechanism, the specific guarantee, the specific community of reported outcomes, it will arrive at the conclusion that the evidence warrants the test. not the purchase made in the hope that the voice will be quiet afterward. The test that the voice has already agreed meets its standard. Comment done below if that is where you are. If the voice has assessed the evidence and found it sufficient, comment done, and then take the step. I want to say something about who you are in the context of what this conversation has been describing. Not who you were told you were, not who the reduced baseline version of your life has been demonstrating. Who you actually are in the design I gave you from the beginning, and in the restoration that the step I have been describing makes available. You were designed for whole brain function. That is not a metaphor. It is a specific neural condition that was your actual operating state in the early years of your life. A condition in which the full coordination of both hemispheres was active and available, and producing the quality of thinking and intuition, and creative access, and relational presence, and spiritual clarity that you experienced in those years as the ordinary quality of your inner life. The gap between that quality and the quality that has been available in the years since is not the measure of your diminishment. It is the measure of the distance between your designed operating state and the state that the conditions of the modern world gradually produced without your knowledge or consent. And the restoration of the designed operating state is not a return to something you no longer have access to. It is the activation of something that the neural plasticity research says is available to every adult whose neural system can receive the specific signal that the restoration requires, which is every adult, including you. Including the adult who has been carrying the gap long enough that the gap feels like the definition of what is available rather than a condition that is addressable. Including the adult who has tried things before that promised the restoration and did not deliver it. Including the adult whose protection is highest and whose standard of evidence is most demanding. The restoration is available to all of those versions of the person watching this, and the provision is in front of all of them at this specific moment through the link in the description below this video. I want to name what you are. You are a cycle breaker. I said that earlier in this conversation, and I want to return to it here with more detail because I think most people who carry that designation carry it without fully understanding what it means in the context of what I have been describing. A cycle breaker is a person who stands at the end of a lineage of reduced access, who carries in their own history the accumulated patterns of a family system or a cultural system or a personal history that produced the reduction I described in earlier and more concentrated form than the ordinary modern conditions produce it, and who has been called not simply to address the reduction in their own life but to establish a different pattern as the baseline from which the people who come after them begin. The restoration that the provision produces in a cycle breaker is not only personal, it is generational. The parent who operates from the whole brain state models a quality of presence and thinking and emotional integration and creative engagement that the children who grow up around that parent receive as the ordinary baseline of what adult life looks like. They do not inherit the reduced baseline as the definition of what is normal. They inherit the restored baseline. And the research on what children model from the adults they have most sustained contact with during the formation years shows that the baseline a child inherits from that modeling is the most powerful single predictor of the baseline that adult will operate from in their own adult life. The step that restores your baseline is the step that changes the baseline your family inherits from you. That is the weight of what is available through the link in the description below this video. Not just your next season, the next generation, not just the quality of your daily inner life. The quality of the inner life that the people who love you most will carry as the inherited baseline of what life is supposed to feel like. The $39 and the 8 minutes a day are the cost of the beginning of that inheritance. And the guarantee means the cost is zero if the experience does not confirm what I have described. I want to speak specifically about the fear that the most honest person in this audience is carrying right now, not the protective doubt that the evidence is designed to address. The deeper fear, the one that is not about whether the mechanism works or whether the community is real or whether the guarantee is genuine, the fear that is about hope itself. The specific fear that forms in a person who has hoped for a specific thing for a long enough time without it arriving in the fullness they were reaching toward. The fear that the next hoping will produce the next cycle of reaching without receiving. The fear that the specific gap I described has been present for long enough that addressing it, actually closing it, may not be what happens next even when the specific provision that addresses it is in front of you. I want to say something specific to that fear. The fear is honest. It formed from real experience. It formed from the specific history of a specific person who was created for more than the ordinary baseline, has been delivering. It is not evidence of weakness or of insufficient faith or of excessive caution. It is the natural response of a mind that cares enough about the thing that is hoped for to protect itself from the specific pain of reaching and not receiving one more time. But here is what the fear does not know. The fear does not know about the guarantee. Specifically, the fear does not know that the specific risk that formed it, the risk of reaching and not receiving, has been removed from this specific step by the specific financial structure of the provision. The fear says, I might reach and not receive, and the guarantee says, if you reach and do not receive, every dollar returns to you, which means the reaching is no longer the specific kind of reaching that formed the fear. It is a different kind. A zero financial risk reach into a specific mechanism with specific evidence behind it, and a specific community of over 18,000 people who have taken the same reach and reported back on what the receiving looked like in their specific life. The fear was formed by a type of reaching. The provision removes that type of reaching from this decision. What remains is a different kind of step entirely. And the person who is brave enough to distinguish between the old reach and this one, to recognize that the structure of this specific provision is different from the structure of the things that formed the fear, is the person who takes the step today and who comes back in 30 days with the comment that the experience confirmed. Comment ready if that is you, if the distinction is clear, if the step is available. Comment ready and take it. Now, I want to say the price one more time for the person who has been listening but who has not yet gone to the description to look at the link. The price available today through the link below this video is $39, not $500, not $49. $39 today through this conversation for the complete sequence, all 4 bonuses, lifetime access, and the full money-back guarantee. $39 is the amount. The link is in the description, and the description is visible right below the place where this video is playing on whatever device you are watching it on. Comment ready below if you are going there now, not after you finish watching, now, mid-conversation. Because the decision that matters is the one made in the clarity that this conversation has produced before the ordinary conditions of the ordinary day reclaim what this conversation opened. Comment ready. Go to the description, click the link, begin, and know that what begins today is the thing I congratulated you about at the very beginning. The miracle was already arranged. You are just arriving at the moment where you accept it. I want to tell you about the specific feeling that the community describes in the hours and days after the step is taken, not the transformation, the immediate texture of the decision. What it feels like in the hours after you have gone to the link and accessed what is available there and taken the first 8-minute practice. Because that feeling is itself important data about what the restoration is producing and what it is going to keep producing as the practice accumulates. Most people describe the first hours after the step as a quality of settled intention, not excitement, not the elevated state of enthusiasm that new purchases often produce temporarily, something quieter and more stable. The feeling of having moved in the direction of a thing that matters rather than continuing to stand at the place where the thing that matters is visible but not approached. That feeling, the specific quality of the internal state that follows a specific act of movement toward what has been calling, is itself a signal. It is the signal of the whole brain system registering that the internal and external environments are now aligned, that what is believed about what is available and what is being done about what is available are no longer in tension. That alignment is part of what the whole brain state produces, not only the analytical and creative and relational capacities I have been describing. The specific quality of inner coherence that comes when a person is moving in the direction their design was pointing them toward, when the reaching is being met with the specific action that allows the receiving to begin. And that quality of inner coherence is available today, in the hours after the link is clicked and the practice begins, before the 30 days of accumulated restoration have produced the shift in baseline I described. In the specific immediate quality of the inner state that follows a specific act of movement toward what has been calling, I want to say one more thing about the window before we move forward. The window is the convergence of several specific things that are all present at the same time today and that are not all guaranteed to be present at the same time tomorrow. The price, the specific access through this link, the specific clarity and motivation that this conversation has produced in you, the specific state of readiness that the whole arc of what has been said has been building toward in the specific person who has stayed through this entire conversation. All of those things are present right now, The window is the moment when all of them are present at the same time, and the moment is now, not as a sales technique, as an accurate description of what today contains that tomorrow may not. The link is in the description. The price is $39. The guarantee is 100%. The community is over 18,000 people who have taken the same step and reported back on what the same window contained for them. And the only thing between you and the beginning of what this conversation has been describing is the decision to go to the description and click the link. I am asking you to make that decision right now. Not after this part ends, right now. I want to come back to the second part of the title of this conversation, the part that says, do not miss it, especially today. I have addressed the especially today throughout what has been a long and specific conversation. I want to address the do not miss it now, in the place where the conversation is building toward its conclusion, because the do not miss it is not a fear-based urgency. It is the description of a specific window and a specific provision and the specific relationship between the two. The window is real, not artificially constructed. The price that is available through the link in the description below this video today is $39. That price reflects a specific arrangement between the provision and the people who are encountering it for the first time in this format on this day. It is not guaranteed to be the price tomorrow. It is not guaranteed to be available at this access level next week. What is guaranteed is that it is available now, through the link, to the person watching this video on the day this conversation was placed in their path. And especially today, in the context of the do not miss it, means that the window for the specific price and the specific access that this conversation describes is the window of today. I am not saying this to produce the kind of urgency that pushes a person past their own discernment into a purchase they are not ready for. I am saying it because the honest description of what is available and when it is available is the most respectful thing I can offer to a person who is standing in front of a genuine provision and genuinely deciding. And the honest description is that the $39 access through this link, with the 4 bonuses, the lifetime access, and the full guarantee, is a today arrangement. You are in today. The link is in the description. The arrangement is current. I want to do something that I want to be very clear about before I do it. I want to describe, plainly and completely, what happens on the other side of the decision not to take the step today. Not to produce shame, not to produce fear. To describe, honestly, what the absence of the restoration looks like in the specific dimensions of ordinary life over the period of time during which the restoration would have been occurring if the step had been taken. Over the next 30 days, the quality of the thinking that is available in the morning before the demands of the day begin will be the same quality that was available this morning. Not because of any diminishment in the person, because the specific restoration of the baseline has not begun. The specific creative and analytical and relational and spiritual access that the restored whole brain coordination produces will remain at the level it has been at. And the gap, the specific gap I described between the designed level and the available level, will remain present, not as a crisis, as the ordinary background condition of an ordinary life, which is exactly how it has been present for the time it has been present. And the question that I want you to sit with for a moment is not whether you can survive the continuation of the gap. You have been surviving it. The question is what the next 30 days look like as the beginning of a trajectory that is different from the trajectory of the 30 days before them. The 30 days that begin with the step look like what the research describes: a shifting baseline, a rising floor, a different quality of daily starting point. The 30 days that do not begin with the step look like today. And today is the day that the provision is in front of you, and the window is open, and the arrangement is current. I want to speak one final time about the guarantee before this conversation moves into its closing section, because the guarantee is the structural element that makes everything else I have said receivable by the person whose protection is highest. 100% of the money returns if the experience does not confirm what I described. The guarantee is not conditional on returning the product, because the product is a digital delivery that cannot be returned. The guarantee is conditional on asking. If you ask for the money back, it returns. That is the structure. That is the protection. That is the provision for the person whose standard is highest. The cost of the test is zero. The potential return of the test is the beginning of the restoration of the whole brain operating state that was your original design. The asymmetry of those two things, zero cost on the risk side and the beginning of the restoration on the return side, is the complete structure of the decision in front of you, and the decision is available right now, through the link in the description below, today. I want to speak now to the person who has been in this conversation the entire time and who has not yet taken the step, and who, if they are honest with themselves, knows why. Not the protective doubt, not the evidence gap, the specific internal thing that is still between them and the step. The thing that has been watching this conversation with a growing recognition that what is being described is real, and that what is being offered addresses something real, and that the evidence is sufficient, and that the protection has been heard and met, and that is still waiting for something, still pausing at the threshold. I want to name what it is. It is the weight of the step itself, not the $39, not the fear that it will not work. The weight of what it means to decide that you are the person who takes this step, who does the thing that demonstrates that the belief in what is available is not just the belief that the mind holds as a comfort, but the belief that the will acts on. The weight of the gap between believing that more is available and moving in the direction of it. The weight of the moment when hope stops being the passive experience of a desire held at a safe distance and becomes the active experience of a reach toward what the desire is pointing toward. That weight is real, and I want to honor it by saying that the step is not asking you to pretend it is not there. The step is asking you to take it with the weight present, to move toward the provision, not because the fear and the weight and the history of reaching without receiving have disappeared, but because the specific structure of this provision, the mechanism, the evidence, the community, the guarantee, is sufficient reason to move toward it even while all of those things are still present. The act of taking the step with the weight still present is not a smaller act than taking it without the weight. It is a larger one. And the person who takes it with the weight present is the person who demonstrates exactly the quality of sustained movement toward what is calling that the whole brain restoration I have been describing is designed to serve and amplify and carry forward. I want to tell you what the person who takes the step looks like from the outside in the weeks after, not to create an aspirational image. To give you the specific behavioral description that the research associates with the beginning of the whole brain restoration, so that when you are in those weeks you recognize what is happening for what it is, rather than dismissing it as ordinary variation or coincidence. In the first 2 weeks, the person who is in the early accumulation phase of the practice begins to bring a slightly different quality to their thinking in the mornings. The difference is subtle enough that the people around them do not typically notice it yet, but the person notices it. Specifically, the person notices that the first thoughts of the morning, the thoughts that arrive before the demands of the day begin to organize the attention, have a slightly different quality than they had before the practice began. A slightly greater clarity, a slightly greater access to the depth below the surface of the ordinary thinking. The kind of thinking that in the past arrived intermittently, and that the person recognized as their better thinking, but could not reliably access or sustain. By the end of the first month, the difference is more pronounced and more consistently present. The person is making decisions with a different quality of integrated access. The decisions draw on both the analytical capacity and the intuitive knowing in a way that feels to the person making them like what good decision-making is supposed to feel like, but that they have not reliably experienced before the practice. The relationships the person is most invested in are beginning to receive a different quality of presence. Not more effort, more full presence. The difference between the attention that is available when the mind is integrated and the attention that is available when the mind is fragmenting between its competing demands. That is the specific trajectory I am describing when I say that the step is the beginning of the next season, not the season as an abstraction, as a specific, lived, accumulating set of days in which the quality of what is available from the restored baseline is producing a specific and describable and, to the person living it, undeniable difference from what was available from the reduced baseline. The person who takes the step today begins that trajectory today. The person who does not take the step today extends the current trajectory. And the specific and honest question that this moment is asking is which trajectory belongs to the next 30 days of the specific life of the specific person watching this conversation. I am not going to answer that question for you. I have given you everything the question requires to be answered well: the mechanism, the research, the community, the testimonials, the guarantee, the specific description of what the trajectory looks like in the weeks and months after the step, and the honest description of what the continuation of the current trajectory looks like in the same period. The question is answered by the decision, and the decision is yours. What I will do is name one more time. the exact action that the decision produces when it goes in the direction I have been describing for this entire conversation. You go to the description below this video. You find the link, you click it. You are taken to the page where the access is available for $39. You complete the transaction. You receive the access. You open the sequence. You find a quiet place and put in your headphones, and you give the 8 minutes to the first practice. And in the quality of what follows the first practice, in the specific texture of the rest and the quiet and the subtle shift in what the remainder of the day starts from, you receive the first evidence that what I described is real, and that what begins today is not the end of the seeking, but the beginning of the receiving. Comment yes, comment done, comment ready, one word, in the comments below, and then go. I want to close this section with a declaration. Not the generic kind, the specific kind that belongs to the specific person in the specific moment of the specific step. You are not the person who almost took the step. You are not the person who watched the whole conversation and felt all of the recognition and held all of the resonance and then navigated away from the description without clicking the link. You are not that version of yourself. That version was a possibility. It was the possibility that forms when protection is at its highest, and when the weight of the step is at its heaviest, and when the gap between believing and acting has been present for long enough that the gap itself begins to feel like a permanent feature of the inner landscape. But you are not that version. I said that at the very beginning when I said congratulations before you had done anything to earn them. I said it because I could see who you were before you could see it in this moment, and I am saying it again now. You are the person who takes the step. You are the person who clicks the link. You are the person who begins the practice. You are the person who comes back in 30 days with the comment that confirms that what I said was true and that the window was real, and that especially today was the accurate description of what today contained. Comment yes, comment done, comment ready, whatever the word is that describes where you are right now. The comment is the external expression of the internal decision, and the internal decision is the one that matters. The one that says the weight is present, and the protection is heard, and the history is real, and I am taking the step anyway because the specific structure of this provision has given me sufficient reason to move, and because the person I was designed to be does not wait at the threshold of a zero-risk provision indefinitely. Take the step. The link is in the description below. $39. Today. The guarantee is in place. The community is waiting. I am watching. And the next season of your life is on the other side of the step that is available right now. Go. I want to tell you what 18,000 people have in common, not the backgrounds. Those are as varied as the circumstances that led each of them to this specific kind of content on this specific kind of day, not the specific problem each of them was experiencing before the step. Those problems span every dimension of adult life: financial pressure, creative stagnation, relational friction, professional underperformance, spiritual disconnection, not the specific area in which each of them first experienced the change after the practice began. That too is varied by person and by the specific demand that each person in their life was placing most heavily on the neural resource that the practice was restoring. What they have in common is simpler than any of that. What they have in common is that they took the step, they went to the description, they clicked the link, they completed the transaction, they received the access. They began the practice. And in the accumulation of the practice, in the specific neural restoration that the research predicts and that the practice delivers, they began to experience the specific quality of their life changing in the direction of the design I have been describing. Not identically, not on the same timeline, not in the same dimension first, but in the unmistakable direction of what the whole brain restoration produces when a person who was operating below their design baseline begins to return to it. I want to give you the specific language of a few more of the community members, because the specific language of people who are living the restoration is the most direct available evidence about what the restoration looks like from the inside. A man in his late 50s who describes himself as having spent his professional life in financial services wrote in the community that the change he noticed first was not in his work but in his marriage. He said that his wife told him, about 6 weeks into the practice, that he seemed more present in the evenings. Not less tired, more present. She used the word available, and he said that when she said it, he recognized immediately what she was describing because he had been noticing it himself. The quality of his attention in the unstructured hours of the evening, The hours that had been the recovery zone from the professional demands of the day was different. Not performing presence, actually present. And his description of what changed in the neural resource that the evenings were drawing from is the description of the whole brain restoration, producing exactly the kind of spillover from the restored baseline into the dimensions of life that were not the primary focus of the practice. A woman in her early 30s, who describes herself as an artist, wrote that after 10 weeks of the practice, she submitted a body of work to a gallery that she had been building toward for 3 years, but that she had always found a reason not to submit. She said the work was not new, she had been making it for the 3 years. What was new was the absence of the specific internal friction that had always produced the reason not to submit. And her description of the absence of that friction as the thing that changed is the description of what the research calls reduced cognitive interference, the specific condition in which the integrated whole brain state removes the competing internal signals that produce hesitation at the threshold of action. I want to speak to the specific quality of the decision that is being made in the moments when a person goes from watching to acting, because the quality of that decision matters, not just because of what it produces in terms of the access it opens, but because of what it demonstrates about the person who makes it. The person who goes from watching to acting in the context of what this conversation has described is demonstrating something specific, not impulsiveness, not susceptibility to persuasion. The specific quality of a person who has heard a substantive case, assessed the evidence with the protection that experience has developed, found the evidence sufficient, and moved in the direction the evidence points. That quality, the quality of moving when the evidence is sufficient rather than waiting for the evidence to be perfect, is exactly the quality that the whole brain state amplifies and that the reduced baseline state suppresses. The restoration helps you take more steps like this one, and this step is the beginning of the restoration. I want to be direct with you about something. Most people who watch conversations like this one watch them more than once before taking the step. They return to the same content or to similar content as the gap I have described continues to produce the seeking behavior that the gap has always produced, and there is nothing wrong with returning. There is nothing wrong with needing more time or more evidence or more encounters with the description before the step becomes available. Every person moves in their own season. But I want to say something for the person who is returning, who has watched this or something like it before, who is familiar with the recognition that the description produces, and who is also familiar with the experience of watching the conversation and navigating away without clicking the link and returning to the ordinary conditions of the ordinary day with the gap intact. For that person, I want to ask a direct question. What is different about today? What has today given you that the previous encounters with this description did not give you? Because if the answer is nothing, then today will produce the same outcome the previous encounters produced. But if the answer is that something has shifted, that the weight is slightly different today, that the internal readiness is slightly different today, that the convergence of the provision and the person and the season and the clarity of this specific conversation has produced something that the previous encounters did not produce, then today is a different day than the previous ones, and a different day deserves a different action. I want to state the price one final time in its complete form, because I want every person still watching to have the full picture before we reach the final section of this conversation. The price for accessing what Dr. Barone built through the link in the description below this video is $39. That is the full price, not a down payment, not a subscription. A one-time $39 access that includes the complete 8-minute sequence, all 4 bonuses, and lifetime access to all of it. The first bonus is a guided visualization for use in the whole brain state. The second bonus is a nutrition guide that reduces inflammation and grocery spending simultaneously. The third bonus is a 100-year-old text that Dr. Barone recommends reading in the whole brain state. The fourth bonus is a 1-page visual reference for the 5 daily habits most associated with the transformation the practice initiates. All of that for $39, one time, protected by a full, unconditional, 100% money-back guarantee with no time limit specified. Beyond the reasonable testing period the practice requires to produce the shift it is designed to produce. That is the complete offer. Everything I have named in this conversation through the link below. Today, I want to say something about the people who are still watching this conversation at this point in it. Not everyone who starts a conversation like this stays through this much of it. The person who is still here has stayed for a reason. The reason is the specific resonance of what has been described with something in the specific inner life of the specific person watching. A recognition, a confirmation of something that has been known but not named. A specificity in the description of the gap and the mechanism and the provision that landed differently than the ordinary claims of the ordinary things that promise to address the ordinary version of the problem. If you are still here, the content has been speaking to something real. And the question that belongs to this moment in the conversation is not whether what has been described is real, it is what you are going to do about the fact that it is real. The link is in the description. The price is $39. The guarantee is in place. The provision is current. You are still here. Take the step. I want to speak one final time about the miracle I called you to witness at the beginning of this conversation. I called it that before I described the mechanism. I called it that before I named the specific provision. I called it that before I walked you through the science, or the testimonials, or the price, or the guarantee. I called it a miracle at the beginning because that is what it is, not in spite of the mechanism but through it. The miracle is not that a neurologist from New York built a tool that uses sound to restore cross-hemisphere coordination. That is the mechanism. The miracle is that the mechanism was built in exactly the season when you needed it, that the research was done and the tool was developed and the price was set at $39 and the guarantee was put in place and the link was embedded in the description of a video that the algorithm placed in your path. Today, on this specific day, in this specific season of your life, when the gap I described has been present long enough to be named and when the provision that addresses the gap is in front of you, and when the window is open and when the only thing between the gap and its addressing is the decision to click the link. The miracle is the specific arrangement of those specific things at this specific time. The neurologist and the tool and the price and the guarantee and the link and the algorithm and the day. All of them converging at the specific moment when the specific person watching this conversation is ready to receive what converges. That is the miracle I called you to witness. Not a supernatural phenomenon that bypasses the ordinary. The supernatural working through the ordinary in the specific arrangement of ordinary things. A link, a price, a day, a person, a provision. That adds up to something that the word miracle is the only accurate description of. And the congratulations I offered at the beginning was the announcement of the miracle before the witness arrived. The congratulations was the declaration of the arrangement before you knew what had been arranged. I said it first because I could see it first. And I am saying it again now so that when you click the link and access what is available there and begin the practice and feel in the first days of the accumulation that something has shifted, you remember that the shift was announced before it arrived. That the congratulations preceded the receiving because the arrangement preceded the decision. And the arrangement was made by the one who makes arrangements in the specific seasons of the specific people who were designed for more than the reduced baseline has been delivering. The provision is called the sequence, the specific neural tool, the 8-minute practice, the restoration. I have used all of those descriptions throughout this conversation because the name matters less than the function, and the function is what I have been describing in detail for this entire conversation. But I want to say one more time what it is and what it costs and where it is and what it includes, because the final time I say it may be the time that lands most completely for the specific person who needs to hear it one more time before the decision clicks into place. It is an 8-minute daily sequence delivered through headphones that uses neural sync technology to restore the cross-hemisphere coordination that is your designed operating state. $39 through the link in the description below. Lifetime access. All 4 bonuses included. Full 100% money-back guarantee. No questions if it does not produce the shift I described. One step between you and the beginning of what this conversation has been pointing toward. The link is in the description. Today is the day. The miracle has been arranged. Go receive it. I want to walk through what the miracle looks like in the specific details of the specific life of a specific person who has been in this conversation from the beginning and who has been carrying the gap I described for long enough that the gap feels like the definition of the life rather than a condition in the life. In the first week after the step, the gap does not close. The first week is not the arrival. The first week is the beginning of the movement toward it. The shift in baseline that the research describes does not happen on day 1. What happens on day 1 and day 2, and day 3, and through the first week, is the accumulation of the specific neural signal that the practice delivers into the specific architecture that is responsive to it. The accumulation is quiet. The effects are subtle in the first week. Most people describe the first week as the week of the noticing that the morning is slightly different, noticing that the quality of the first few hours of the day has a slightly different texture, noticing that the specific mental friction that the ordinary morning produces is slightly less than it was before the practice began. In the second and third week, the noticing becomes more confident. The subtlety gives way to something more named. The person begins to be able to describe with more specificity what is different and how. The analytical clarity is sharper in the mornings. The creative access is more reliable. The emotional integration, the capacity to remain present and regulated in the moments that most require it, is more available, not perfected, more available than it was. And the availability compounds as the accumulation of the practice increases the baseline from which each day begins. By the fourth week, which is the end of the first month, the shift is enough that the person can look back at the month that has passed and identify specific moments in which what was available from the restored baseline produced a different outcome than what would have been available from the reduced baseline, a decision made with more integrated confidence, a creative output that accessed a depth that was not reliably accessible before the practice, a conversation with someone who matters that achieved a quality of presence and connection that the person can recognize as different from the quality available before. The miracle is not announced in the first week. It accumulates through it, and through the second week, and through the third. And by the end of the first month, the person who took the step is living in the beginning of what I was describing when I said congratulations at the very beginning of this conversation. Not the fullness, the beginning. And the beginning of the miracle is the thing that cannot be taken from the person who has stepped into it, because they have the evidence now, not the claim, the evidence. Their own neural system demonstrating in their own daily experience that what was described was accurate and that what was promised is delivering. That is what $39.08 a day purchases. Not a product, not a supplement, not a course. The beginning of the personal evidence that changes everything about how a person holds what is available in their life. And the link in the description below this video is where the beginning begins. I want to close this part of the conversation by reading back the specific thing you are going to comment in the section below, not as a script, as the description of the internal state that I believe you are in right now if you have heard what this conversation has been saying with the ears I designed you to hear it with. You are going to comment because something in you has shifted, because the specific convergence of the description and the evidence and the provision and the day has landed in a place that was ready to receive it. Because the gap I named is the gap you have been carrying. Because the congratulations I offered is the thing you have been waiting to hear from the place you have been waiting to hear it from. Because the miracle I described is not a claim about another person but an announcement about yours. Comment yes if that is where you are. Comment done if the step has already been taken. Comment ready if the step is what comes next. The comments below this video are the record of the people who were in the miracle and who received it. Add your word to the record. I want to give you the closing of this conversation with everything I have that is meant for the person who has stayed through the whole of it, not a summary, a benediction, a declaration, a sending forth. The words that belong to the end of a conversation that was always about more than the content of its parts. You came into this conversation as someone who was seeking. I know that because the conversation found you. The algorithm that placed this video in your path is not random. The pattern that caused it to surface in your specific digital environment on this specific day was shaped by a sustained attention to the things this conversation has been about. The hunger for the more that the ordinary baseline was not delivering. The reaching for the quality of mind and life and purpose and connection that the gap I described was making harder to access than it was designed to be. The seeking behavior that produces the pattern that produces the encounter with the provision that the seeking was always moving toward. You leave this conversation as someone who has been seen. I have described you in this conversation with more specificity than the ordinary version of this kind of content delivers. I describe the gap by name and by mechanism and by cause and by specific expression in the specific dimensions of your daily life. I describe the provision by mechanism and by evidence and by cost and by community and by guarantee. I describe the trajectory that begins when the provision is received and the specific shape of the days and weeks in which the restoration accumulates and the baseline rises and the ordinary life begins to express the design it was always pointing toward. All of that was a description of you, of the specific person this conversation was placed in front of today. You leave this conversation as someone who has been equipped. The description I gave you of the mechanism and the provision and the evidence is not just persuasion. It is the specific knowledge that allows you to take the step I have been describing with the kind of informed confidence that the research and the community and the guarantee support. You know what the tool is. You know what it costs. You know what it produces and in what time frame and through what mechanism. You know the names and stories of people who have taken the same step. You know the guarantee that protects the financial risk of finding out. You are not moving toward the provision in ignorance. You are moving toward it with more information than most people have when they take most of the steps that change the direction of their lives. I want to spend time in this final section speaking to what the restored life feels like from the inside, not as aspiration, as the description of the specific daily inner texture that the research associates with sustained whole brain function, and that the community of people who have taken the step confirms in their own words as the experience they are living. The restored life does not feel extraordinary. That is the most important thing to understand about it. It does not feel like the inspirational version of the experience that is sometimes described in the heightened language of peak moments. It feels like ordinary, but ordinary at a different level. The ordinary quality of a morning that starts from a baseline of integrated neural function instead of fragmented neural function. The ordinary quality of a conversation that draws on the full relational and emotional and analytical capacity of a person operating from whole brain access instead of the partial access the reduced baseline provides. The ordinary quality of a creative moment that accesses the depth that is available when both hemispheres are coordinating instead of the surface that is accessible when they are not. The restored life feels like what ordinary was supposed to feel like from the beginning, not the extraordinary inserted into the ordinary elevated to its designed level, and the specific quality of that elevation, the daily, ordinary, repeatable, reliable quality of it, is the thing that the community of over 18,000 people describes with the most consistent language when they talk about what changed, not the dramatic, the daily, not the peak, the floor, the place from which the ordinary day begins. None of those people are told about the practice. The practice is 8 minutes in the morning with headphones, private, internal. The effects spill over into the relational field not because the person is performing the effects, but because the whole brain state produces them as the natural expression of what that state is. I want to say the closing words now, the words that belong to the end of a conversation that has been, from the very beginning, an announcement of a provision, an announcement of a window, an announcement of a miracle that was arranged for the specific person who was placed in front of it today. The announcement was true when I made it. The miracle was arranged before this conversation began. The provision has been in place, waiting for the moment when the person it was arranged for arrived at the window that made it accessible, and you have arrived today. You are at the window. The provision is on the other side of the decision to go to the description and click the link. And I want to say to you, from the place where I can see both the gap you have been carrying and the provision that addresses it, and the season that opens on the other side of the step, that the season is good. That what is waiting on the other side of the step is not a product. It is the beginning of the version of your daily life that your design was always pointing toward. The quality of mind and creativity and relationship and purpose and spiritual clarity that the whole brain restoration makes available. The restored baseline from which the next season of your life begins. The first morning of a different kind of ordinary. Go to the description below this video. The link is there. Click it. Complete the transaction. Receive the access. Find a quiet place and put in your headphones and give the 8 minutes to the first practice. And then come back and comment what the first practice gave you. Not in 30 days. After the first practice, come back and tell me what the first 8 minutes produced. And if it was exactly as nothing as you feared it might be, come back and tell me that too. And Dr. Barone and his team will return every dollar with no questions asked. But if the first practice gives you even a shadow of what I have been describing as the beginning of the beginning, if the quality of the rest that follows it is even slightly different from the ordinary rest, if the first 2 hours of the day after the first practice have even a slightly different texture than the first 2 hours before it, stay with it. Keep going. 8 minutes tomorrow and the day after. And let the accumulation do what the research says it does. when a neural system that was designed to respond to the specific signal receives it consistently. I am declaring over your life right now, from the place I hold as the one who designed you for the capacity I have been describing, that the season beginning today is the season of the arriving, not the season of the reaching without receiving, the season of the reaching meeting the provision, the season of the gap closing, the season of the whole brain state returning to the operating level it was always designed to maintain, the season of the daily life expressing what the design was always pointing toward. Congratulations. I said it at the beginning and I mean it at the end, with the fullness of what the whole conversation between the beginning and the end has established. You are the person who receives this. The link is in the description. The miracle has been arranged. The congratulations was always true. Go receive what it was announcing. I love you, I see you, I have spoken over you and your next season with the fullness of what I have for you. Now go.